We're going to open our meeting now and just advise everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed via the City of Hobart YouTube channel. And I note that we have 10 elected members present. We are at the moment, we are expecting Councillor Fox via Zoom, and we're expecting Councillor Coates at some stage. I don't think we've got any apologies. So I would like to start by acknowledgement to country. In recognition of the deep history and culture of this place, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which the City of Hobart was built, and acknowledge the determination and resilience of the Palawa people of Tasmania, who have survived invasion and dispossession and continue to maintain their identity, their culture and their rights. Item 1 in our agenda is the confirmation of minutes, moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Alderman Barakis. That's the minutes of Tuesday the 14th of June. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. It's carried unanimously. Item 2 is transfer of agenda items. Are there any items proposed to be transferred on either the open or the closed? There being none, communications from the Chair. I do have communications tonight. Just to update the Council on intergovernmental relations meetings last week, the CEO and I were in Canberra engaging with ministers and senior officials of the incoming Commonwealth Government on priorities for both Greater Hobart and the City of Hobart. We also met with contacts in the ACT Government. So just to run through very briefly the people that we met with, Christy McBain, who's the new Minister for Regional Development, Local Government and Territories, to discuss Hobart's election priorities and the incoming government's proposed approach to city deals and local government generally. She was interested to discuss housing affordability and availability and issues around building resilience to climate change. Minister McBain was very active at the ALGA conference, which was on that week as well, and she had noted that both of these issues were of broad concern to local governments right across the country. Also met with Catherine King, who is the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government, to discuss Hobart's election priorities, and in particular how the City and the Commonwealth can work together on the government's election commitment of $20 million to deliver on-water ferry infrastructure. Met with Chris Steele, who's the ACT Minister for Transport and City Services, and that was to hear about the ACT's approach to constructing and operating public transport on major transit corridors through effective use of public-private partnerships. Also Ray Griggs, the Secretary of the Department of Social Services, who cover housing and what's going to be happening in the housing space. Lynn O'Connell from the Deputy Secretary of the new Department of Agriculture, Water, Environment and Climate Change, and that was really, they've also got jurisdiction over the Antarctic program, and so talking about the precinct and the much needed port upgrades to ensure that that precinct can proceed. And finally, Hannah Wandel and other officers from the National Resilience and Recovery Agency, a fairly new agency, but the one that will be administering the incoming government's new $200 million a year disaster readiness fund, which local government expects that it will be, that they will be a major recipient of some of those funds. So I'm happy to discuss any of these meetings or issues in more detail with any elected members or any members of the public who are interested.
Lord Mayor, I know it's unusual, but I wonder if I could ask you to prepare a report, because you've indicated some of the broad issues, but we have not. So I wonder if you could present a report to an appropriate committee. Thank you.
That's fine. I don't think we need to. We can take that on notice, that request. Thank you. So item 4 is notification of council workshops, and that there were no workshops. We have now public question time, and we do have a public question from Mr. Edwin Johnston. Mr. Johnston, if you would like to come forward and ask your question.
Thank you. I'm here to ask some questions about a City Loop bus service. Now, I understand a report is coming, but my question relates to an existing bus service that the council was providing on Saturdays but was suspended due to COVID. This service was a Saturday-only service and was well organised with a pre-existing route around the CBD's multi-storey car parks and into Salamanca. One of the stated rationales behind the upcoming report is that regular City Loop bus services are a feature of all capital cities and several major cities. So by admitting that we are the only capital city without this regular weekday and weekend service proves the council is way behind on this issue, but don't fear, the report is coming. If we are talking about reports, as far back as 2012, the Inner City Action Plan mentions the merits of a City Loop service. Launceston must have been paying attention because 2012 was the year that they started their City Loop bus service. So my two questions are, will the Salamanca Shuttle City Loop bus service be reinstated to the market, and if so, when? And number two, as the council is currently considering the merits of a City Loop bus service, can the council at least extend this service to weekdays to form some sort of trial? Thank you.
Mr. Johnston. As you've alluded to, the issues raised by both questions are actively being considered by the council, however they are not yet resolved. So it's not possible to provide a commitment to either of your particular questions, although these options will be considered as part of the report that's being prepared. The notice of motion, which was adopted by the council in May about city bus options, requires consideration of the very issues that you have raised, and will be dealt with as part of that report. It's anticipated the outcome will be available by the end of the calendar year, because it does involve engaging with other stakeholders, including the state government, who in other states often fund those City Loop services. So quite a few conversations and a report, but it will consider many of the issues that you've raised in your question. Thank you. And that will be sent to you in writing as well, Mr. Johnston. Thank you. Okay, are there any other questions from the floor? Yes, one at the back. Would you like to come forward and introduce yourself?
Hello, Ryan Posselt from West Hobart. I've just got a question regarding a discussion paper that was released as part of the precincts planned in October last year regarding developer co-contributions to infrastructure. We're 9 months beyond that report, that discussion paper being released, and I was wondering why hasn't the council acted, and if there is any movement on the 4 options that were put as part of that discussion paper, in light of, in particular, the Utah's move into town, which is a developer that's pouring significant money, $87 million for forestry building, into the city. It's a revenue-raising opportunity for council that seems to have gone astray. The question is, what's happening with the discussion paper, and which of the 4 options is the council looking at?
Thank you for the question. I might ask the CEO to respond, if she's okay with that.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and happy to respond to that question. My understanding is that piece of work was done as part of the Central Hobart Precincts Plan, and officers are in the process of finalising a first draft of the actual structure plan itself. So we're going through final edits of that draft at the moment to meet the timeframes that we committed to council, and that will enable council to consider the draft prior to broader public consultation around the penultimate draft itself. So that's a work in progress at the moment, with a view to coming to council before the end of July. Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Okay, no other questions? All right, we'll move on now to, and Councillor Fox has joined, as has Councillor Coates. Thank you. Are there any petitions? Yeah.
There are none, thank you, Lord Mayor.
Supplementary items, I don't think we have any. No. Item 8 is indications of pecuniary and conflicts of interest. Do any elected members wish to item?
Yes, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Item number 19, please.
19 for Councillor Sherlock. Any other elected members wish to declare a conflict? There being none, we will now move on to the Finance and Governance Committee. And this is our major item for tonight, the budget estimates for the City of Hobart. So as we normally do, I'll just run through the budget estimates before I hand over to the Chair of Finance and Governance to introduce the motion before you. So on behalf of the elected members of the City of Hobart, I'd like to present the 2022-23 budget that we're considering. It is a responsible and balanced budget. We forecast that we will deliver a modest surplus at the end of the financial year of $0.53 million, while also ensuring that we continue to invest in our city's future with a record investment of over $72 million in new or improved infrastructure. Noting the significant cost of living pressures being faced by our residents, we have done everything that we can to limit the increase in rates this year to one of the lowest average increases across all councils in the state, with an average increase in residential rates of 2.27% or about $43. This budget with our annual plan is designed to deliver a great city for people and improve what matters to residents, businesses and visitors. While the headline figures of this budget may seem fairly unremarkable at first, it is worth noting and reflecting just how significant it is that we've been able to deliver this responsible financial forecast given what we've been through. This budget is a reflection of the Council's remarkable efforts to successfully navigate the extreme events of COVID-19 over the last 2 years. The ability to deliver a prudent result today stems from the focus and dedication of council officers and elected members who have successfully guided the city through the challenges that we've faced. While our focus tonight is on future operations, I would like to take this opportunity to once again thank the council staff for their dedication through this very challenging period. So focusing on core services, this budget does represent another year where we will continue to get our focus on fundamentals right. We know that roads, rates and rubbish is certainly not the limit of the council's responsibilities, but it does represent a significant proportion and an important part of our budget. And it is how we improve these core services through innovation and continual improvement that we will continue to enhance our city's sustainability and livability. It is worth reminding ourselves of significant infrastructure and services that we continue to maintain and deliver well for the Hobart community. We deliver more than 300 services to 50,000 residents and many more workers, students and visitors. Everything from waste management to planning services to public health, sports facilities, public art and community programs. This year's budget continues to dedicate appropriate resources to maintaining and improving the delivery of these service priorities while ensuring that we have a well-serviced city now and into the future. Investment in capital works. So while our focus does remain on delivering those core services well, we are also continuing to improve our city with a record capital works budget of $72 million. Nearly $31.7 million will be spent on new assets or upgrades, with some of the key projects this financial year being $7.6 million for a new warm water pool at the Doon Kennedy Hobart Aquatic Centre, $2.15 million for a major new facilities upgrade at Queenborough Oval in Sandy Bay, $1.52 million for the Newtown Retail Precinct upgrade, which includes grant funding from the Australian Commonwealth Government, and $753,000 for new or upgraded stormwater infrastructure, $200,000 for barbecue facilities and toilets at the new Tolmans Hill Playground, and $50,000 for new street trees. $34.5 million will be spent on asset renewal. So this is in addition to the capital works deferred from 21-22, with key improvements including $10.2 million in road renewals, $3 million in supporting infrastructure for bushland, parks and gardens, and $2.6 million in the renewal of recreational facilities. Investment in services. Through this budget, Council will also continue to invest in programs and services that will benefit the people of Hobart and create a vibrant future for our city. This includes $3.7 million in city safety and cleaning, $13.9 million to manage our on and off-street car parking, $7.9 million for managing our sports fields and parks, $7 million to collect and manage our waste and recycling, $2.4 million in bushfire mitigation initiatives, and $2.2 million in events, festivals and activations, including long-term planning for key growth precincts across the city, such as North Hobart, Central Hobart, Salamanca and the proposed civic and cultural precinct. As in other years, putting together this budget has certainly been had its own challenges. This year, the huge increases in property values in Hobart has put significant pressure on the affordability of housing. New property valuations by the Valuer General will take effect on the 1st of July 2022 for council rating purposes, with an overall increase of 29% in municipal assessed annual value, or AAV, from 2019, and this is and there's significant variation in increases between different properties. This has required us to carefully manage corresponding rate increases across properties across the municipality, so to ensure we minimise any bill shock in a challenging economic environment. The council is also required to collect, as usual, the state government fire service levy, but this year it has increased by a fairly significant 6.6%. This is not a City of Hobart charge. We act as the collection agent for the state government, which is then paid to the State Fire Commission. And this is also the first budget where we are required to collect the state government's new landfill levy of $10 per household. And this levy will be used by the state government to fund various waste management programs, including new recycling projects across Tasmania. Notwithstanding these challenges, as we continue to deliver high quality services and capital improvements, we have been able to significantly minimise the financial impacts on our ratepayers. At 2.27% or $43 on average, the council-driven component of our average residential rates increase is one of the lowest in both Greater Hobart and in Tasmania. The increase for our average commercial ratepayer is 0.63% or around $154 before the increase is required for state government fire and landfill levies. Due to the city's managed approach to rate increases from the municipal revaluation, no commercial ratepayer will experience an increase to the council-driven component of the rates of more than 1.6%. So in conclusion, the operating result, taking all of this into account, our overall operating result puts council in a strong position moving into the future. Our overall budget of $225.8 million, with operating expenditure of $153.8 million, gets the balance right between delivering and improving our services, providing a stable and ongoing financial sustainability for the city. I commend my elected member colleagues, the CEO and all of the officers who have worked hard in the last few months, in particular to ensure the best outcomes possible in presenting this budget for 22-23. It is a document that we can all be proud to support. And I'd now like to invite a motion to adopt the recommendations of the Finance and Governance Committee in respect to the 2022-23 budget estimates. Thank you. Chair, Alderman Zuko.
Yes, Lord Mayor, I'd like to move the budget estimates for 2022-23.
Second.
Councillor Harvey had his hand up first.
Lord Mayor, you covered everything very clearly in your speech. And I've got to say that at the Finance and Governance Committee, it was a very, very good discussion that was held on the day in respect of it, and in particular some of the issues that we faced in respect of this budget with the new valuations. There's been a lot of work happening in respect to this budget, in particular all the workshops that were held to sort of reach a point that we could move forward with a budget for this year. But most importantly, Lord Mayor, I commend our new CEO, Kelly Grisby, and I won't mention by name like I did in committee the other day of all the staff that worked hard for that because the CEO is well aware of all those staff, and I commend them all for actually working closely with the elected members to ensure that we didn't have Armageddon happen in regards to what happened with revaluations. I have been contacted quite a number of times by a number of people so far in the re-evaluation situation. I received an email tonight in regards to one that's going to be putting in an objection to it and an appeal to it, like everyone has the right to do so. I've spoken to colleagues in respect of some anomalies that some homes have gone from I think 1.2 million, if I can recall, to over $3 million in valuations. But in saying that, the work that was held, the work that the Hobart City Council did in working closely with our officers was to minimise the impact on the residential sector. So we've come up with a slightly different valuation process that ensures that the residential sector is not absolutely heavily burdened as it could have been had we not acted and gone down the track of changing our rating system for this period. One of the most important things to my point of view, and we always look at, everyone looks at their valuations and everyone looks at, well, my rates are going to go up X. But I think it's very, very important to note, Lord Mayor, yes, there is a 2.23 on average. That doesn't mean to say everyone's going to get 2.23. Some people might get 0.9, some people might get 2.4. But the most important component in the residential sector is the, and I would like to read these both out in the report. That pursuant of Section 88A of the Local Government Act 1993, Council by absolute majority sets a maximum percentage increase cap on the general rate as previously made at 2.6%, where the increase has occurred as a result of municipal re-evaluations undertaken in accordance with Section 20 of the Valuations Act. So, Lord Mayor, what that actually refers to is that irrespective of the valuations, it'll be a 2.6% maximum increase that our residential sector is going to actually receive. That is to do with all the hard work that our officers have done, the elected members have done in respect of the workshops and everything we've done. So this could have been, as I said, a potential Armageddon. It could have been a disaster for our residents, but I think this council has acted quite reasonably in going forward this way. What I like about it as well is as the capital city, yes, some people might say, yes, we've got a higher rate base, but we're a capital city and there's a few other aspects to it. But when we do look across the board, Lord Mayor, across the state, I think we've done our ratepayers justice by keeping it at 2.6. But not only that, Lord Mayor, as we all well know, we have a huge commercial sector as well. And no doubt the valuations in the commercial sector have dropped a little bit, but I believe, my speaking to people far more astute than I am in the financial world, they believe there's going to be, it'll balance off within a period of time. I believe that's still the COVID hitting the commercial sector. But again, in that domain, Lord Mayor, we're doing, the same scenario occurs in the residential. It's going to be capped at 1.6%. So I think in all, we've done very well. Unfortunately, as the collector of bad news for the fire levy, we are only the collector of that. We don't, that doesn't come to the Hobart City Council, and that is increased by 6.6%. And of course, we've got the new waste fill levy that is again a new impost. Lord Mayor, as you've mentioned, there's $72 million worth of works that we're going to do this year. I really wish our staff very well to try and get that done, especially with the market at the moment. We can't get builders, we can't get tradies and all that. So if they spend that $72 million in this financial year, I am going to absolutely have a party if I'm still on this council next year, because it's going to be a hell of a job, especially with the current situation in the building market. But anyway, look, I really do hope we can deliver that. And the other, I did receive a question yesterday from a ratepayer. What is the council's level of debt? Yes, we understand that the council is in debt at the moment, but some of that debt is really minimal impact on interest. I think we've still got about a $15 or $20 million loan that we've received from the state government at just about peanuts, I think it was, 1% or even less. Which really doesn't impact on us, yes, but it impacts on us in the long term. But one of the things about debt as well that we've got to look at is I've seen, I think all elected members have seen the future projections, and it looks like that in about 10 to 12 years' time we will be in surplus. And in that respect, having the debt being in surplus means that the generational aspects of our community means that we're delivering now, but to be enjoyed in the future. So the intergenerational aspects of it would be, I don't believe, an impact. Lord Mayor, I will sit down now. I commend this budget. I've got to say, in all the years that I've been on this council, and considering the current climate and situation, it's probably one of the best ones I've seen. Thank you.
Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Again, I commend the staff, and the staff do the work. We might come up with some ideas in the numerous workshops we've had, but it is the staff that have got to the situation that we are today. Well, I think Alderman Zuko may have left the impression that we're not going to be in surplus, but we're going to have a slight operating surplus this coming year. I think it was $500,000 operating surplus. There was one workshop, probably a couple of workshops you weren't at, Lord Mayor, and the important workshop that I thought was the most valuable one was the Value General gave us a very good briefing about how the valuations have changed. And whilst your speech does sort of try to minimise the increase in values, the Value General did have some good figures that the land value in Hobart has gone up nearly 122% in the residential part of it, the capital value 98%, and the AAV 89%, and that's between 2014 and 2021. Whilst you've just mentioned the increase from 2000 and the last financial year and this year. Obviously the rates are determined on AAV, and some people will have quite a significant rate increase because also the Auditor General gave us a breakdown of the suburbs, which I think this should actually go up on our website. to indicate, for example, Mount Stewart residents probably will find their rates will go up considerably because their AAV went up 110%. So Hobart itself was the lowest increase, the Hobart part of the locality. And I was listening, I read something yesterday in one of the reputable journals like The Australian, I think, that 1/5 of all properties in Australia are now worth over $1 million. That's all properties in Australia are worth over $1 million. Now in Hobart, the Auditor General told us that about a handful of properties were worth over, residential properties were worth over $1 million in 2014, but 5,000 of them now are worth over $1 million, and we've got roughly 21,000. So the proportion of expensive homes in Hobart is greater than national percentage. The land value, as I mentioned earlier, has gone up too. So ratepayers won't be receiving a bill from us for land tax, but even the changes in land tax means land tax will go up for owners of land in of properties in Hobart, and it's going to go up considerably because of that increase. And that would mean I think it's a quarter of the properties in Hobart are rental properties, so presumably rents will go up. Sadly, will go up to reflect that increase in land tax. So whilst we have very high rents at the moment, I think the rents will go higher. With a shortage of rental properties as well as the land tax going up. Whilst we have been very good and in our getting the figure, average figure low, I still think that the people of Hobart are going to suffer in this point where there's not wage growth, there's increased inflation. So I don't think it's not as rosy as Lord Mayor's speech has indicated. There are some challenges to the city, and hopefully the new council come October will tackle those challenges, because I think every dollar we take out of the community is less than the community can spend. So when we get money from the community, and it is a tax, our rates is as someone like Dr. John Freeman, a former Lord Mayor, it's the only form of wealth tax essentially we have left anymore. When we take money from the community, we've got to spend it wisely. So leaving it on a positive note, I echo what the Chairman of the Finance said. $70-odd million of new capital expenditure is going to be a challenge. It may put a strain on the people who do provide services to us, but let's hope that gets achieved. But again, I think this council, in terms of an expression that another councillor from another municipality called us, we're a subcommittee of the community looking after infrastructure. Now,
30 seconds.
I thought he was slightly being interesting there, but essentially we are the body that looks after the infrastructure for the city. We're not state government, we're not federal government. We should always have focus on the basic service, the core services.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. I just have a sort of comment/question. So we, perhaps I'll phrase it as a question initially. So the total AAV for the residential component of the city of Hobart, what was the increase in AAV compared to last year? The total AAV increase. We heard there was an 89% increase, but I'm not sure whether that was for all buildings or whether that was just residential. Do we know that? Residential, yeah.
Ms McDonnell to respond to your question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The increase for residential was 46% from last year. So this is last year's valuations compared to this year. So 46% increase for residential.
So the total AAV for residential has increased by 46%.
Lord Mayor, that's correct.
Yeah. What is the... And maybe this will provide an explanation to people that are listening to this, but many people would have expected that if the total AAV went up and we still only had to raise a certain amount of money, then the number of cents per dollar of AAV would have gone down, because we've got much more AAV, we still only have to raise a certain amount of money, and therefore we need less cents per dollar AAV. But in fact, it's gone to 10.504%, and general rate. And if I'm correct, and I stand to be corrected, in our listing last year, it said that the general rate was 7.04 cents in the dollar. Is that correct?
Through you, Lord Mayor, yes, that is correct.
Sorry.
The reason why the rate in the dollar has gone up is because the city for the first time has introduced a managed rating strategy to mitigate the impacts of the revaluation. So we've introduced differential rating plus rates caps. Now the rates caps mean that no residential property will experience a rate increase for the council controlled component of the rates of more than 2.6%, so that's no properties. And for commercial, that percentage is 1.6%. So that's before the state government landfill and fire levies that we have to collect.
So just to be clear, so that if a ratepayer currently has is currently paying rates of $5,000, but their AAV has gone up by 120%, doubled, they're not going to be asked by us to pay rates more than 2.6% greater than $5,000.
Through you, Lord Mayor, that is correct, yes.
Okay. Because a lot of people, the reason I'm asking this question is because, you know, three neighbours of mine have had their AAV go up from 1.2 million to 3.2 million. And of course they're saying, oh my God. And then if they see that the actual rate of the cents per AAV dollar has gone from 7 cents to 10 cents, they're going to say, okay, that's gone up 3 cents, multiplied by my massive increase in AAV, I'm going to be paying $25,000 in rates each year. But we can assure them that's not going to happen. That if they were paying $10,000 last year or $5,000, they'll only be paying a maximum of 2.6% more this year. And if it's greater than that, they can come to us and ask to please explain. Is that correct? Thank you.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like also to commend the work of the staff and also the input from elected members. I too, like Alderman Zuko and Alderman Sexton have had various people saying what's happening with our rates, but tried to explain as best I could about that managed rating system. And of course we've had more rateable properties to draw rates from over the course of those building improvements. It is a wicked problem, isn't it? You know, like we have the implications of the AAV, meaning that you can draw upon a higher rental for properties, and I know we rely on the goodwill quite a lot. Well, that is to say, to continue with the diversity and range of people being able to live in our city because of these prices and land values going up. It is really an expectation, if you like, of some land owners, property owners, to retain low rentals where possible as well. So that obviously doesn't work for everybody, but I think there is a matter of goodwill associated with who does have rental properties or rentals available. Lord Mayor, I think the article that was in the paper today really summarised it very well as to what the rates rise means. This differential rates and managed rating system is something quite different for us, and I know full well that we'll be looking at the short stay accommodation and how that might be rated in residential areas when we review this further down the track. Also, this 300 services that the council provides, it's a huge amount of services, and if we want to maintain that service to our community, some of those very standardised services that councils have been known to do, but also providing arts and community services, we still need to do this. So I really do commend this as a really balanced rates setting, and really appreciate the work that the council staff have done to get to this point.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Alderman Thomas.
Look, it's probably more foreshadowed, Lord Mayor, than for this particular budget. But for every year when we get to this point, we quickly make the comment, as the chairman did, that we are a collector of the fire service levy. It's not our charge. But it's something that I think this council should, or the next council should, start getting more involved with, because we don't require some performance measure. We don't require the fire service to in any way adequately discharge its explanation to us for these charges, for the cost. I mean, the price we paid over the last 10 years, I imagine we could have a fire brigade almost on every street corner, because we've paid a fortune towards, as a community, this is not as a council, to maintain the fire brigade throughout the state. Now, we might say that's an obligation we have as a capital city of a state to basically spend the money we do, or to allow our community to be charged that amount. But it's something as a community I believe we do need to apply our minds to next year, and whether or not it's simply receiving a more critical report from the Fire Service Commission as to what their charges are like, how they've tried to keep their charges within order. It does hit. It's another impost that our community is required to bear. We are this year, of course, also going to be receiving, if we're led through newspaper and media articles to believe, at least two rises in the official interest rates at the federal level, which will cast incredible cost and distress on a lot of borrowers, now particularly borrowers in the last 12 months, 15 months, people have been buying houses. This is going to have a real impact, and we as a community and as a representative of the community cannot avoid being seen as a protector in some way of how the community can survive through this next 12 months, which is going to be very hard indeed to adequately cover at least possibly 2 official interest rate rises on top of what I agree is a modest interest rate rates charge, but everything builds up and everything adds up. The other thing that I think a future council should look at much more closely is what we provide for pensioner rates rebate. We ask people to age in place, and there is a reasonably large number of properties in our city that are now owned by a surviving partner, and the rates that we charge, whilst we do have a very small amount of pensioner rates remission, it's minimal. It's something in the region of $440 a year, because it can't go above a certain maximum. And this, I think, is something that we're going to need to address. We don't want to kick people out of Hobart. We don't want them to be forced out of Hobart, but the cost of living here is still an extremely high cost to age in place. I think, as everyone has said around this table, the officers have done a very good job this year, faced with a very late revaluation. I'm only pleased that the Valuer General in that workshop he provided to us said that the rates were revalued as at the value last June, as opposed to December when manic buying was happening. So we were relieved at least of that. But I think we've got some watching briefs that we will need to focus on over the next 12 months, particularly pensioner, particularly what the state can actually justify in terms of the fire service charges. And that's what I need to say. Thank you.
Great. Alderman Brackus.
Just briefly, Lord Mayor, because I think a lot of it's been said. I'd like to start by commending echo the commendations of the hardworking staff who I'm sure burnt the midnight oil to get this variable and managed rates put in to try and smooth some of these shocks. and I hope that the public is aware of the work that was put in. I'd also like, and thank you to Alderman Sexton for that clarification, which I think is important for people to hear. I'd like to echo what Alderman Briscoe said, because I think it's extremely important. An extra dollar taken from the ratepayer is a dollar less that they have to spend. And when we're talking about the huge cost of living increases and inflation that everybody's suffering at the moment, I think that's really important to reflect upon. I'm glad that what we have in front of us is a modest increase. It's the kind of increase I'd be hoping for every single year, and I'm glad, and I was kind of worried that, as with previous years, we do sometimes have a bit of back and forth on this council as far as the rate should be higher so we can spend more, the rate should be lower. And it seems that this year, for whatever reason, that everybody seems to be on the same page. I think that's a good thing. I think when we are in a period of rapidly increasing cost of living, I think it's the least we can do to try and not add to those pressures. So I'd commend this budget, Lord Mayor, and hope that we can do more work in the future to try and ensure that we're giving ratepayers the best bang for their buck.
Alderman Brackus, any other discussion? Do you want to sum up?
Yeah, I'd like to sum up very a number of things that were said. The fire levy, I actually totally agree with Alderman Thomas. I think this needs to be looked at, because at the end of the day, we're collecting this on behalf of government. We have, and it's got nothing to do with any particular government. We've done it for years. So that should be looked at seriously, because at the end of the day, we're told collect this and just give it to us and hand it over. So I think that's a very, very important point. Just to make the point of the differential rate that we've struck, which is, to my point of view, ensured that we look at those costs of living as mentioned, because at one stage I didn't like what I saw. I honestly didn't like what I saw in the early discussions we've had in this, Lord Mayor, and I've got to say we've come to a great point. There's been a mention of land tax, and I'll say that land tax and stamp duties need to be looked at, Lord Mayor, because at the end of the day we've had valuations go up by 46%. So every time there's a transaction, and I know what's happened with my own personal land tax, Lord Mayor, it's gone from there to there. So that could be something maybe the new council should also look at, in potentially writing to the state government at the time, and maybe we should make the fire levy, stamp duty and land tax a bit of a discussion point with the state government. I'd just like to close on this point, Lord Mayor. Just about every speaker, yourself and every speaker so far, has commended our staff, and they've done an absolutely amazing job. You're not getting the wage rise, okay? Thank you.
Well, they probably are, actually.
Okay, I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. It's carried unanimously. Okay, we're now moving on to the City Planning Committee, and I'll note that this council is now acting as a planning authority, and invite Deputy Lord Mayor to introduce item 10.1.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So this is under the City of Hobart Interim Planning Scheme, 21 Burnside Avenue, Newtown, change of use to visitor accommodation. Lord Mayor, this was a tied vote, 3-3 at committee. So I'd like to move that the recommendation is refused, which was part of the minutes, as you would have no doubt seen, because the proposal does not meet the acceptable solution or the performance criteria with respect to clause 3, 1E, A1 and P1 of the Planning Directive number 6, because of the gross floor area. I think Craig, Mr. Garth might put that up on the screen for those.
It's just coming up now, just if you can.
So I'll move that and talk to it.
Moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
Lord Mayor, this is a 4-bedroom, 2-storey house in the middle of Newtown. It's in the heart of a residential area, and this application is for a change of use. The committee, or half the committee, felt that this was not a suitable use of or suitable use or application. So it has been suggested for refusal with based on that reason.
Further discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Again say no. Show of hands, all those in favour.
Alderman Sexton, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, just bear with me, Councillor Fox, Deputy Lord Mayor and Lord Mayor.
Against?
Alderman Zuko, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas and Alderman Briscoe. That's carried, Lord Mayor, 7 votes to 5.
Okay, it's given by this item.
Okay, moving on now to item 10.2, is that correct?
10.2, Lord Mayor, yes, this is 3 Himberley Court, West Hobart, and adjacent road reserve, garage and studio. I think this Lord Mayor was called in by an elected member, and so it comes to council for a decision. Lord Mayor, this is an extension of a property on what is the front boundary. So it is for a garage and residential component, as well as landscaping. There were only 3 representations in relation to this, and we had somebody present to committee, and the concerns that the representor had, and there was it wasn't a unanimous decision at committee. The concerns that the representor had was in relation to how the planning scheme was interpreted. So, as you'd expect, garages, carports or garages are built to the boundary, but directly on top of this is, with no setback, the same sort of setback as the garage, would be a residential component separate to the house. So there is no setback to that. So that's quite unusual in this part of West Hobart, and you probably see some carport extensions, like rooms above carports or garages in some parts. I know there are examples, or there is one example in Pitt Street, but certainly the concern from some of us was that, and there was quite a lot of discussion, was that the setback provisions shouldn't be the same for residential as commercial. So there may be a foreshadowed motion against this, but in other ways this met planning scheme requirements as the motion suggests.
Alderman Briscoe?
For the benefit of those people who weren't at the planning meeting, I did have concerns too. The setback for almost all the properties in that street is 3.5, and the only carports and a couple of garages fit close to the street, as the Deputy Lord Mayor said. We tried to get the applicant to say, well, the deputation, actually, who is an architect, pointed out you could swing the residential component around and just take it back, and it would fit all the acceptable solutions, or you could just slide it back towards the existing residence and it would meet all the acceptable solution too. But the applicant wasn't prepared to do that. I believe this is one that will be determined in the tribunal, but on the face of it, because everything else complied, I think we don't normally get into design aspects of applications. We let the architects do that. A question was asked to the, I don't know which officer now, but let's say the planning department, would the solution of pushing the residential component or the studio further back to the residence or swing it around 90 degrees? They said, the answer, if I'm if I can quote him correctly, or in summary, is that would it comply more, but it's still their assessment it does comply. As I said, I believe this is one that's going to be determined in the tribunal, but on the balance, I thought, well, on balance, it is a resident studio which could be rented out, I imagine, so it helps the housing situation. And I look forward to seeing the outcome in the tribunal, whatever the vote tonight is.
Further discussion? Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I was also in the planning committee where we debated this particular issue. And the issue for me is based not on the supply of rental market, as it were, or housing. That is not the criteria I have to use to make my judgment. My judgment is based on clause 10.4.2 where in the acceptable solution there is a setback issue, and from memory I think it is about 4.5 or whatever it is, but here it is 0 setback. Now when it comes to the garage, there are a number of properties on that particular street which does not have the setback. But here the dilemma is that you have the garage and the unit sitting on top of it, and there is no setback. And therefore, under that particular clause, I have difficulty supporting that. Thank you.
Any further discussion? So I'll put the recommendation for its approval, is it? Deputy Lord Mayor?
Yes.
Oh, did you want to sum up it all? No. All those in favour say aye.
No. Aye.
Against say no.
No.
Show of hands. All those in favour?
Alderman Zuko, Alderman Sexton, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Coates, Councillor Fox, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe and the Lord Mayor.
Against?
Councillor Dutta and Deputy Lord Mayor, and it's carried Lord Mayor 10 votes to 2.
Okay, we're now moving on to item 11.
Yes, Lord Mayor. Yeah, thank you. This is, I move the submission on the 30-year Greater Hobart Plan.
Seconded by Alderman Thomas.
Lord Mayor, this is really a submission by Council in relation to the Greater Hobart, Committee on the 30-year Greater Hobart Plan. This was released, the plan was released on the 9th of May for public consultation, and Council is responding to that. And this is the first time that transport, housing and precinct planning have been brought together in a spatially integrated manner in a whole of city approach to help coordinate development over the long term. So it's a Greater Hobart working with councils and the state government, various departments of the state government. The draft plan provides a detailed strategic approach to residential development, infrastructure and economic development over the next 30 years, which also provides an overarching framework for considering council strategies and plans and particular precinct structure plans. And whilst it's not the same time frame of our inner city precinct planning scoping document, which is over 20 years, the number of our residents that we're likely to see, the projected numbers, are very similar as well. Just to go to the recommendation, it's really in support, and just a couple of points that are from the resolution that I might just highlight. The feedback from the council would state that apart from this overall planning for sustainable growth of Greater Hobart, but also protecting the values important to our community and visitors as fundamental, it would also look for providing better integration of land use and infrastructure planning. The revised residential targets of 70 to 30 infill to greenfield development is supported by a land release program which is supported by the council, so most of that would be infill development, which again suits the inner city precinct planning model. and work that's been done there. And the revised densification areas are supported, including a review of the densification area in Sandy Bay where targets may not be achievable due to heritage constraints. And this framework needs to provide for a diversity of housing types and encouraging more medium density housing. It's essential. So we often hear about the missing middle, and this is really responding to that as well, to having a greater mix of housing. So I think everybody's had a chance to have a look at this recommendation in full. So I endorse the officer's report to us, and believe that substantiates what the council really wants to see happen in relation to Greater Hobart and that overall planning.
Further discussion? Is there any further discussion? I did have a question actually. I saw, and I can't move this from the floor, but I did see, from the chair, I did see some concern raised from the Save UTAS group that this plan had kind of already made a decision about the Sandy Bay site, and I wondered whether there could be a statement in here that there's nothing in this plan should assume that the Sandy Bay UTAS site will be developed as proposed in the master plan, given no rezoning application has been assessed or approved at this stage. So it's really just a statement, because there seems to be sort of some suggestion that this plan has already made a decision about that, and but I'll just see if anyone on the floor wants to just to reassure people that it doesn't preempt that process.
Lord Mayor, I understand what you're saying. The only thing I can suggest is, if the council really wishes to have it in, is maybe just give some advice on that basis. So it's as advice in respect of this. So
I'm happy to just say that as advice, unless anyone wants to move it as an amendment. But
I'm happy to move it as an amendment for advice, to add to this, and I think that's as best we can. I suggest to the council we can do. So I'm going to move it as advice to be added to this as advice.
Seconded by Councillor Dutta. I'll just vote on that amendment to add the advice. All those in favour say aye.
Could I just have the advice read out?
The
amendment is...
I may assist, Lord Mayor. The amendment would be that in no way the Hobart City Council has made any determination in respect of the housing development should the university move to the city completely, something like that. Is that correct,
I've
Lord
got
Mayor?
it written here.
Okay, well the Lord Mayor's got it written, can hand it on to the General Manager.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the advice be included that the plan should not assume that the Sandy Bay UTAS site will be developed as proposed in the UTAS draft master plan, given no rezoning application has been assessed or approved at this stage. Okay, so all those in favour of that amendment say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously, and now they've got the substantive motion. Is there any further discussion on the substantive motion?
Just a question, because I might be being a stickler for grammar here, but I'm not sure part 6, as much as I completely agree with the sentiment, and I'd echo and endorse the sentiment, should need to be fully explored be replaced with are fully explored, given that it sort of says the implementation must ensure that yada 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 are fully explored. It kind of seems like two... I might be being a stickler for the wording there.
Item 6, was it?
Yeah, it's a
VI on the report, where it says the Greater Hobart Implementation Plan must ensure.
Okay. So maybe that can be noted.
Yeah, like I don't think it changes the intent. It's just a bit of a...
Sorry, what's the word?
Grammatical error.
Where it says encouraging more build to rent need to be fully explored. I don't think makes sense with the must ensure at the beginning of the sentence. But it's neither here nor there.
That's fixed in the submission. Okay, I don't think there's any further discussion, so I'll put the motion as amended. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. It's carried unanimously. Item 12 is that yours, Deputy Lord Mayor? Yeah.
Lord Mayor, this is, I move this compliance investigation policy and review guidelines be accepted.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
and adopted. Thank you. So the purpose is to seek Council's endorsement and adoption of a new compliance and investigation procedure policy and new infringement review guidelines. Essentially, Council just tightens up some of those infringement processes and certainly guidelines for officers to use in relation to infringements that might be building compliance, which we've sometimes hear about and have quite a lot to say about. But it could be applied to dog owners as well. So it just really follows the lines of what other jurisdictions do in relation to providing compliance and having better guidelines around that.
Alderman Thomas?
I'm just wondering why we would include this particular provision in one of our documentation when the law says that the Ombudsman can review the actions of a respective council. It's the law already. I don't know why we're adding to it by specifying one particular item.
Question for Ms. Avey or CEO? No.
Lord Mayor, because I asked for this to be put in the document, perhaps I should answer it, because it wasn't an officer's recommendation. The policy is a good one because it crystallises or puts on paper the procedures that the council follow anyway. So just and the council officers can point to, there's our compliance, we're following that. Before it was just more like in people's heads, I think. But sometimes, as a former ombudsman, I know you'd probably know that many people are not as skilled at knowing the way around the bureaucracy, administrative law, as we are. I imagine you are better than I am. So I thought we've got to give it out because the feeling out there in the community, and I get it all the time, you can't beat City Hall. Well, sometimes you can beat City Hall because you get an outside body. And not that I've looked at it recently, but ombudsmen often overrule council's administrative decisions for good reasons. And obviously the council officers then take that on board and don't make that mistake again. But I think you've always got to allow people to have a review of administrative decision. It's a fundamental part of administrative law, and pointing out where you do it, because there's so many. Do you go to the Integrity Commission? Do you go to your Member of Parliament? Do you harass elected members? Do you harass the Lord Mayor, the Deputy Lord Mayor, the CEO, the legal officer? Hey, no, there's a totally independent way you can do this through the Ombudsman. And I'm sure, I don't know whether when my learned colleague beside me was ever dealt with Hobart City Council administrative decisions. I don't know.
I'd like a chance again.
Yes, you'd like a chance again. I'm sure you would. I'm sure that. I hope that answers you. It just gives the people a little bit of hope. Happy with that,
further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 13 is monthly planning statistics. Deputy Lord Mayor.
I'll move that this be received and noted, Lord Mayor, and just to note that during the period of May 1 to 31 this year, $114.5 million of application or permits were issued. $114.5 million. That was 89 permits, and there were amongst those 6 new single dwellings, 5 multiple dwellings, 30 extensions, 12 extensions or alterations to commercial properties, and 2 major projects, that being the forestry building and one at Villy Drive, which was the application for the whisky distillery. So move that.
Did someone second that? No, seconded by...
I did.
Alderman Barakis. No discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. And item 14, Deputy Lord Mayor.
And this report in relation to the monthly building statistics.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
Again, I mean, not as large in value, I suppose, if you're looking at it from point to point, from this year to last year, but still very buoyant. So moved.
I'll put that, any discussion? I'll put that, all those in favour say aye, against say no, carried unanimously. Item 15 is a motion from Alderman Zuko.
Lord Mayor, but look, before I put this motion, I'm just a little bit disturbed at the moment. If I may ask your indulgence for a personal explanation, please.
Sure.
Lord Mayor, on the Finance Committee, when I summed up, I actually commended our staff and just made a little bit of a joke in regards to don't ask for a pay rise, which was, I think everyone took it in the jest it was. But we have a troll on Twitter who has called me now arrogant to, in one hand, commend the hard work of the officers, and on the other hand, slap him down because they're not going to get a pay rise. Lord Mayor, I'm absolutely appalled that we have trolls like this particular person, Andy Song, going online when they absolutely do not realise what a number of us elected members do. And you were here, and a lot of elected members were here, where I named each and every officer that did a lot of work. And for someone to want to take something like that and turn it into an issue is absolutely beyond harassment, Lord Mayor. And I just wanted to make that personal explanation. It was a joke. And I think everyone in this room, and maybe 99.999% of the population, took it that way. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Zucker, I wonder if you wouldn't mind if we just, maybe the CEO would like to clarify the issues around the, generally on staff enterprise agreement next year, just so it is clear for everybody.
Sorry, thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Alderman Zuko. And look, I do understand that comment was certainly a joke, and that's how we've taken it as staff, Lord Mayor. But just to clarify, you will have noticed, certainly elected members are aware of this, there are provisions within the budget for a pay increase for staff, in fact, and that relates to a commitment that was made prior to budget, in fact, last year, around the enterprise agreement coming into line with CPI. So as the CPI increase has been introduced as of this year, we are required to pay that to staff effective in this budget year, Lord Mayor. So just to be clear that there is actually a pay rise, and elected members, Zuko and other elected members are well aware of that provision in the enterprise agreement, Lord Mayor. So thank you. Thank you.
Talking about us, actually.
Lord Mayor, I thank the CEO, because actually the CEO the CEO and I actually discussed that very point.
Okay, we'll move on to the motion now, Alderman Zucker.
Sorry to take time. Lord Mayor, I'd like to move the motion as is on the books. Lord Mayor...
By Councillor Sherlock.
Yeah. Lord Mayor, we have received over a period of time, well, I don't know if everyone has, but I have, and I've passed on this to the officers on a regular basis. They probably might think I'm absolutely nuts, from the Motor Riders Association of Hobart, in respect to actually the original bike parking that was in the middle of Elizabeth Street, in between Macquarie and Davey, had been there for years. Now, it was taken out when there was a lot of work done in respect of the mall redevelopment and everything like that, and also the change of bus systems. Just so everyone's aware, the buses on the left-hand side, on the opposite side of the town hall, they actually have been there forever and a day that I can remember in this council. The only changes that's happened in Elizabeth Street is the 2 bus stops on the other side of the road, closest to the Hobart City Council. So when the buses turn into Elizabeth Street going down, they turn right and go immediately left. That used to be all car parking at one stage, and now it's 2 bus stops. So there hasn't been dramatic change to the buses there, because the buses on that go up towards that turn right into Elizabeth Street from Davey Street on the left-hand side, and they all turn left. There is a right-hand lane turn there for cars to turn, and I have looked at this for quite a period of time, every time I've come to council over the last 6 months, and looked and looked and looked and actually sat there watching buses, what their movements are and what their movements are not. The buses are always going left, always going left. You get the odd bus though, you get the odd bus that wants to overtake the other bus that's waiting to turn left and sort of goes around it on a double left. And I find that actually extraordinary because that bus driver is actually going up a lane that's only a right-hand turn lane. So that's actually breaking the law. Now, so I've looked at it and I thought to myself, and I've spoken to the association, and I thought, well, you know, with the parking and traffic issues, which were part of our survey, I thought, why not look at reinstating this car parking? I actually spoke to one of our elected members tonight and said, well, maybe we should look at how the bikes actually drive into it, but we can actually design the central part in that way. And I've got to actually, you know, I gave it a little bit more thought about what was said. If the bikes come up, turn right into Elizabeth Street, and they're on an angle, they can actually drive in on an angle and drive out on that same angle. So it actually makes it better than what it was before, where they were parked all straight across down the line. So that was a very, very good suggestion. But Lord Mayor, all this is basically seeking to give council just to consider, not to do it, not to implement it or anything like that, to consider it with a report back, in particular after they have consultation with the relevant stakeholders. Lord Mayor, if this organisation is writing to us on a regular basis, and if this could in any way, shape or form assist in reducing any impact, and I've got to say I like their idea of encouraging more electric bikes in Hobart, because I've actually seen the documentation that they've provided me with electric bikes that are overseas at the moment, Lord Mayor, that don't even require registration because they're under a certain CC, and they're electric. So we should be also looking at how we can encourage people that come to our city, and maybe we should be encourage them to come here, and we give them free parking, and possibly, like I'm saying, we charge them for charging. But those particular bikes in particular, that if you come to the city, park in the city, you pay free, and we'll give you free charging for that size electric bike, because we should be encouraging those bikes. Lord Mayor, I sold my last bike a number of years ago because most of my bikes have always been bikes that I use in the bush, Lord Mayor. No, I'm not going to ask for an extension. Lord Mayor, I do hope that everybody supports this. And again, it's not about us making a determination tonight. And I believe that in everything I've seen and what I've done in looking out there is room to actually do this.
It might have been Councillor Harvey on his feet just ahead.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Getting slow in your old age. Lord Mayor, I'm happy to support Alderman Zuko's motion tonight. I've also been looking at the motorbike parking out here for a number of years, and I've had the same sort of correspondence that Alderman Zuko's had from the Motorcycle Riders Association, and I've forwarded that like you have as well, and the answer I've got is the answer that we've been provided tonight. But I'm happy to re-look at this again, because I do see that there will be a growth in small electric motorbikes in the future. And I've been following them online as well, because there's some really interesting bikes out there, including electric Harleys, which will be the greatest bike ever invented today. Yeah, I just can't wait. But I'm supportive tonight. I'd like to have another look at this. There's an opportunity to put some more motorbikes there in anticipation of what I hope will be a growth in electric motorbikes into the future. And then we'll have to go through how do we plug them in there. But anyway, but we won't worry about that for now.
Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, I rise to support it. Just as a question, I thought we provided more motorbike parks just here in Davey Street for a while. You did down there. There's a few.
May I clarify, Lord Mayor? There's a few at the back of Town Hall, but again, yeah, there's a few there.
Yeah, I was just thinking that the continual problem with electric scooters everywhere, and our last motion before council, which I had a move an amendment about parking, perhaps we could consider the parking of the scooters there as well. But I know he's interjecting a little bit, but you haven't seen that, Lord Mayor.
For order myself, yeah.
I try to do it with a bit of humour. Yeah, no, I support it, and I think seeing Alderman Zuko mentioned his motorbike riding days, I gave up motorbike riding when I had an accident.
Any further discussion, Alderman Thomas?
Yes, look, just as it's going to lead, if it's passed, to a bit of a review of this, of this area, which will have potentially consequent impact on other parts of the city. I spoke with the mover of the motion earlier on today until my phone just died just then, and I would suggest that we add, just to give the administration some flexibility, after the words between Macquarie and Davey Street, so that review is done, and other suitable motorbike parking areas in the CBD in consultation with the stakeholders. All it does is it allows the administration to look at any consequence of changing this in respect to any other impact on other parts of the CBD. So I'll move that as an amendment.
Lord Mayor.
Be accepted in by the mover, so that's good. Any further discussion, Deputy?
The seconder, sorry.
Sorry, seconder. Are
Sorry
you
to-
happy with that? Thanks.
Accept that, thank you, Lord Mayor.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yes, Lord Mayor, I appreciate the motion from Alderman Zuko, and certainly it hasn't gone unnoticed, the ongoing lobbying by the Motor Riders Association of Australia, and Damien in particular. He's a very good advocate for motorbike riders. And we did have a report, which I think is in the notes, from which went to Infrastructure Services in relation to parking. I had concerns about parking off Watchorn Street, directly opposite where you enter the garden. It's not the Garden of Unearthly Delights. It's I'm in the wrong city. The Hanging Garden. So some of that motorbike parking had been lost, which was on private grounds. And there was, I know Mr. Gervasoni has done significant work in looking at motorbike parking. I know one of the concerns that Damien has raised in relation to motorbike parking with me is the slope on Macquarie Street, so where the TMAG parking, in front of TMAG, there's a significant amount of parking, and also on the other side of TMAG, at the entrance to Dunn Street, it's a very narrow spot to park in fast-moving traffic. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's ideal. I appreciate what Alderman Zuko is saying, but I think also that we could really have this report consider, the council officers consider ways to increase motorbike parking. And I know that we've had survey saying, you know, we're not at capacity, but I think it's a chicken and egg thing. So actually having ways to increase motorbike parking across the city may be worthwhile in that. And secondly, just in relation to motorbikes that can be charged and scooters, not e-scooters, but scooters that are electric scooters that can be charged. I was recently very fortunate to be in Rome, and I noticed that in Rome there seemed to be a lot fewer petrol motorbikes in the inner city, which, whether that was true or not, it seemed to be like a lot more electric scooters, not e-scooters, but they were there as well. But perhaps we should look at, and I think it was raised, that we should be considering if the report could also consider the benefits to providing e-charging stations to encourage electric versus petrol motorbikes. So
Lord Mayor, may I just respond to that, if I may?
Zuko, yes.
Yeah, Lord Mayor, I believe that the amendment that's moved by Alderman Thomas resolves about looking at other things, because it's expanding to other areas of the city. That's the intent, to see what else is available within our city. And in regards to the e-scooters, if the deputy reads my rationale, and it talks about purchase of electric motorbikes such as and free charging stations and electric motorbikes as part of designated program to encourage more of it. So the intent of my rationale is to hopefully give to the officers to look at that, and also what I said earlier about some of the European motorbikes, the smaller ones, enticing them. So we could keep on going and going and going and adding to this, but I believe the officers would have taken on board a number of things, and also the deputies. So I believe it's already in the whole big overview. So.
If it is, Lord Mayor, maybe through you to the CEO, if that is reflected.
Yeah, it can be reflected in the report, that possibility of those charging options. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just quickly, look, I wouldn't say that my motorbike days are behind me. I think for a reformed leadfoot such as myself, I think the day I decided at a young age, the day I got behind a motorbike would be the day I ended up in hospital. But look, I think this was the removal of the motorbike parks from just over there was something that I always wondered about and wondered what the logic was behind. It seemed like such an obvious place for them. That's where I'd always grown up, seeing those motorbike parks there. And I think this is, as has been said, look, we've got the the future of electric bikes, electric scooters, separate from e-scooters, of course, but even petrol-powered scooters, petrol-powered motorbikes. A person that, because of accessible parking, decides to use their motorbike rather than a car, I think would be a positive outcome especially for those of us in this room that want to reduce car usage. I think the impacts on congestion would be quite substantial, and obviously the carbon emissions would be much improved, even those petrol ones. And as we move on to electric motorbikes and electric scooters, those improvements will get even larger. I think this is an opportunity where we get to give commuters that choice between driving if they need to, or using a motorbike, or using other forms, but in this case a motorbike, in a way that doesn't negatively impact anybody else. I see it as a win-win, and as long as the suggested safety issues are taken into consideration, I see this as something that we can do that increases that choice of transport mode without negatively impacting anybody. So I think it's an open and shut case for me, and I'd encourage everybody to support this.
No further discussion. Did you want to sum up, Alderman?
Just very, very briefly, I just wanted to say this, and actually, again, Councillor Harvey actually just made a point in regards to charging and charging stations, and I just sort of quickly mentioned that potentially what you could do with something like this, again, has to be designed and all that. You could have the power going along down the line of it with ground charging stations right down the line with every bay. So, but that's that's hypothetical, but that's how you could probably overcome the fact of just having one. You could have them all going down the line. Anyway.
Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. It's carried unanimously. Item 16 is another motion. This one is from Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, I'll just start by reading out a couple of things. In its submission to the Future of Local Government Review...
Alderman Thomas.
Thank you, Alderman Thomas. In its submission to the Future of Local Government Review, Council stated, restrictions on the activity of councils during the lead up to local government elections are important to ensure that councils are making decisions that protect council resources and do not inappropriately burden an incoming council. Continuing on, council submits that at a minimum, the following types of decisions should be prohibited under the Act during election period: relating to the appointment or remuneration of the Chief Executive Officer, committing the council to expenditure exceeding 1% of council's income from rates and charges in the preceding financial year, allocating resources for use, whether with express or tacit approval, to elected members beyond what is allocated in its existing policies, adopting new bylaws or policies, matters which the council considers could be reasonably deferred until the next council is in place, and which the next council considers should not otherwise be made during an election period. Lord Mayor, these are all things that this council supported, I think unanimously, possibly from memory, in its submission to the Local Government Review. It was noted that this is something that would be preferable to be put into legislation. My understanding is that the Minister for Local Government, Minister Street, supports these inclusions into the Act. But I think it's a reality at this point that those changes won't be implemented between now and the next election, or this coming election. That's no reason why we can't implement these ourselves and commit to these. I think it's important. I think as the election gets closer, things will get more political. There will be electioneering, and that's how this goes. I think already this year, and I've said it myself. There's motions come up and people say, "Oh, it must be an election year." I think it's important that this chamber is focused on the community and not focused on individuals around the chamber during an election time. But I think more importantly, the organisation itself isn't implicated in the goings-on of election time, and that major decisions, and I think this is something that was noted in the council submission, major decisions which affect policy, which change the direction that the council's moving to, unless there's an absolute critical reason why they have to be made now, should wait until the next council. This is a position that this council supports, and I think it's something that will eventually get implemented regardless, but for the purposes of good governance, I think it's something that we should all look at ourselves, and we can do that. I think we have the time to do that. I think it's a responsible thing to do, and I believe that we can all continue to operate in the space of an election in our own times, but leave the functions of council to this chamber. And I don't think the two should conflict with one another. I think that's the reason why state and federal governments have these provisions, and why we're talking about it now. When I put out that I was moving this motion, I got a fair amount of feedback, but the most consistent feedback I got was, "Oh my God, do you guys not already do this? Is this not already a thing?" As if it was an obvious thing that every level of government should do during an election. So I'd commend this, Lord Mayor, and I'd hope that it's supported widely. It shouldn't be seen as being critical of anybody. I think it's more just for the preservation of good governance, and especially the organisation.
I think Councillor Harvey was up first.
We'll go 2 out of 3, 4 out of 3 out of 5.
Lord Mayor, I support this. I think there is a good case for having caretaker mode for council. It happens in federal and state, but I can't help but point out the irony. I don't think people should be putting notices of motion or anything that would have a change of policy in the months leading up to the election. So I guess you have to go through the irony in order to put this up now.
The only way to get it done.
Yeah. So I will be supporting. I don't think it's a bad idea. But anyway, I just love the irony. But it happens in other councils. I understand Kingborough's got a policy there, so it's pretty easy to lift it from somewhere else or develop our own. But reasonable idea.
Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you. The age is showing. I used to beat everyone up once. Yes, I support it. Interesting, when we were having a discussion in the governance policies in the Finance Committee, I did mention there was some indication there wouldn't be time, and I made a speech saying, of course there's time, and then Alderman Baraki said, I put a notice of motion, I wasn't aware of the notice of motion. So it is in, I noticed in the administrative response to the notice of motion does indicate that, Lord Mayor, that you were recently wrote to by the Minister for Local Government. I don't think we've seen that letter, but
we did.
Oh, we did we? Good. Like in the last few days?
No, it's about 9 days ago.
About 9 days ago, good. So encouraging the adoption, which demonstrates that we do it, then I presume other councils will do it as well. I haven't had a chance to look at Kingborough Council, but other people obviously have. So I support the motion. Good governance, I presume it would go into, click into operation when the writ is issued. Similar to state and federal governments. When the writ is issued, then if we're going to be candidates, rather than being the Lord Mayor, you'll be Lord Mayor in name, but presumably, or Deputy Lord Mayor, or councillors, or aldermen in name, but we'll then be, if we nominate again, we'll be candidates. And I think that's really, really important. Notice of motions, yes, yes. I'm sure there will be some late notice of motions, but I think it's the idea that that puts everyone in the community who is going to stand for alderman or councillor or deputy Lord Mayor or Lord Mayor have equal footing. So, those people will be elected or not on their merits, not because you already occupy a position. So I think it's good governance in that sense. It's good governance because decisions shouldn't bind, decisions we make in that caretaker period, which presumably is a month, shouldn't be bind a new council, especially if we're spending money or making policy decisions. And I think amongst ourselves, we've said we're not going to change the structure of committees. I know people have floated the idea of portfolios, including Alderman Zuko. That sort of decision should be left to the new council. There's a couple of other things that we've talked about ourselves that people have pushed to get it implemented before the end of this year. But I always argue that is a decision for the council. It may be that there'll be a complete wipeout and there'll be a brand new council here. Some things like that do happen. But I still think whoever's left here after the council elections, that's when, and the new people, that's when we make major policy changes. And so I commend Alderman Barakis, and as he's taken it with a bit of grain of salt, the level of irony, it is something you had to do. Yep.
Alderman Zuko.
Yeah, look, I'm a little bit concerned, Lord Mayor, what Alderman Briscoe just said. I'm just waiting for Twitter to explode. Beat everyone up once. I just wonder how that troll's going to take that one there on what Alderman Briscoe just said. Just take the irony of what I just said. Beat everyone up once.
Did I say that?
Yes, you did actually. But what you meant, Alderman Briscoe, is you beat everyone up to stand up to speak. But it could be taken differently by a troll on Twitter.
Sorry, I'm pretty sure I didn't say beat up.
No, you meant beat everyone up when you stood up.
Oh, I'll beat you up, yes. Yeah.
You see, it was just a comment in jest, Lord Mayor, how someone might decide to take that and put it on Twitter and just say that Alderman Briscoe's going to beat up Alderman Harvey, Councillor Harvey.
Well, we could do that too.
Lord Mayor, I just want to speak on one thing. It's motions. Everyone knows, and I think especially Councillor Harvey knows, my views have always been that all motions should be going through committee, notice of motion should be going through committee. We had that as a council policy once, and it was working brilliantly until a number of elected members decided to say no, under the legislation I can do it. Yes, that is correct. Under the legislation it's very, very clear that you can put notices of motion up to council and motions to council. It is very clear there. But we developed a policy within this council to take them through committee first, and we had it very defined. If it lost in committee, it still came to council. If it won in committee, it still came to council. But at least it was discussed round the council table. I'm only saying this because motions was mentioned, Lord Mayor, and I'm sort of inclined to throw in an amendment, but I'm not. I just like that noted, and hopefully in the new council, irrespective of what's in the legislation, that maybe we can come up with an agreement that we would honour a policy that we would put up so that we can discuss motions through committee, and I think that's the best way for them to come up. And that way there we don't end up with anyone trying to shut us down or move, let it be put or whatever have you, Lord Mayor, because I think irrespective whether we agree or disagree, and Lord Mayor, you know, with the buses, like we might have our differences on the floor on different times, but when someone comes up with a good idea, I think it's best discussed in a committee environment. That's my viewpoint, and hopefully that will be taken on board by the new council. I won't move an amendment, Alderman Barakis. Or any.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
Oh, thank you. Councillor Dudder was probably first, but I'll be brief. Look, the information that the new Minister for Local Government, Minister Street, sent in relation to Kingborough's election caretaker period policy, I think is excellent, and I would like to think that should council officers do this, like make these changes, that we just draw upon pretty much what Kingborough has done. It's set out very clearly. It's very simple, and I think Alderman Barakis is right to bring this to council for discussion, because it is about that accountability and transparency that we as elected members or as candidates should, there should be that difference. So it's clear in this policy, and I suggest that it is pretty much picked up as has been recommended by the Minister anyway.
Councillor Dutton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a question to begin with. Firstly, I'm wondering if in the past the council have thought about this or not, and if they haven't, why not? Because it seems to be running smoothly, to my understanding, or there hasn't been a problem in the past, or there has been.
I don't think the CEO would know in this case.
What about any of the senior members here? Would they have any knowledge as to why that this wasn't brought in before?
I don't think
Okay.
I think
All right.
no one's going to answer.
Thank you. Thank you very much. No, I would support this as well, and I think it is very important for us to do this. The whole idea mentioned earlier on about Kingborough, I looked at it as well, and I was quite happy with some of the statements made in there. However, with regards to policies, it's my understanding that when we are elected to the full term. And if you want to bring about something, we are entitled to do that. And it's that particular elected group who makes the decision until such time when our time expires. However, if a decision is made or a policy is made, an incoming council can always vote against that. With the absolute majority, and these things do happen. But I do want to support this, and I think we're on the right track to do something. Thank you.
Councillor Coates.
Look, thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I'll rise in support. I think it makes sense. I also, being one of the newer ones, can't answer a question as to why this wasn't looked at previously, or it hasn't been something that's been around for a long time. I don't know, but I suspect it's partly to do with the fact that we didn't used to have all out, all in. So it used to be, but there were some members that were continuing, in which case it didn't necessarily make sense to go into a full caretaker mode when there was a level of continuation. That said, I support the motion. It makes a lot of sense, and I think the officers have done a very good job in providing the reasons as to why we should be supporting this, and I will.
Thank you. I might just add very briefly some other information. The Minister did come into a Greater Hobart Partnership Committee last week, I think it was, to talk about a whole range of other issues, and did confirm that, as Alderman Barakis said, that they would pass these provisions into legislation probably next year across the board. It will probably be based on something a bit like the Kingborough model. So I think that we do need to sort of ensure that this is not, we're not disenfranchising people and, or changing something dramatically. We need to keep it fairly in line with the model that the Minister is proposing. Otherwise, we're just kind of putting in a particular thing for a couple of months, and then there'll be a different model in the state government when they make the change. So again, the officers, I'm sure, will provide that in their report, just to reflect the direction that the state government and other councils are heading with this kind of provision, so that we're consistent with some of the other councils. Thank you. Did you want to sum up?
Just briefly, Lord Mayor, to address some of the things that have been said. Look, I'll start by accepting the irony that Councillor Harvey raised. I think that is quite funny. I do enjoy it when the banter in this place is light and not insulting. Look, just to touch on a few things, Lord Mayor, in regards to the Kingborough provisions, and I think it was remiss of me not to mention that, and just the intention of the motion being that the CEO responds to us with with suggested wording is that this should be something that belongs to the whole council and not to one member, or and it should be properly informed. And I think there'd be every likelihood, and I'd have the expectation that it would be informed by existing provisions such as the Kingborough, what's in Kingborough Council and what the minister suggested. Just on something that Councillor Dutta said, just like a state government, just like a federal government, a member of parliament or a member of any level of government is elected for that full term. But state and federal parliaments do still have that caretaker mode. And the reason is, and I think it's an important point, the decisions which affect our community for tomorrow and the decisions which affect our council for tomorrow should be made by tomorrow's council, not yesterday's council. And as we get closer and closer to election day, we are fast becoming yesterday's council, and I think the fate of the next 4 years should be in the hands of those that sit in this room after October, and with luck we'll have some familiar faces here, and we might have some different faces here. But I think the major decisions that govern our city and the major decisions that affect this council as we approach October should be in the hands of those that are in this chamber after, Lord Mayor. So I'll commend this motion.
Okay, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 17 is the Finance and Governance Committee. Alderman Zuko, did you want to?
Lord Mayor, the government's framework, it's the draft governance framework. I'll move. Draft framework marked in attachment A, 6.2 open finance, be adopted.
Any discussion?
Just very briefly, I got up to and beat Councillor Harvey this time.
You needed your back in though, didn't you?
Or my shoulder or something. Yeah, so what's lacking, and I haven't got it here, but the concept, and it will come up in a debate we'll have shortly about UTAS, is that we haven't got a governance principle of transparency in our decision making. And I think, and I'm not going to suggest an amendment because I'd rather bring it up through the Finance and Governance Committee myself, but I think that's what we're missing from that transparency, and a lot of people in the community have picked that up. Well, hopefully we'll introduce that, but overall I think it's a good governance policy, except that major principle is not there. Now, I think in the past there's been a lot of trust in our organisation that whilst transparency may not have been written down as a principle, people trusted the organisation, its leadership and its elected members to do the right thing by the community. But because of YouTube, Twitter, social media, and to a lesser extent the Mercury, newspapers, there is a lot more scrutiny going on, and I think the only way we can make sure that the community is justified in our decisions is that we have transparent decision making. And so, whilst a comment that Alderman Zuko referred to in Twitter, that gets multiplied 10 times. We noticed in the last couple of weeks there's been comments about posts that have been put on potential candidates' Facebook page late at night by a fake profile, and then it turns out to be a story in the Mercury a couple of days later. The comments were deleted when they were noticed, and I think that's the sort of how fake news gets distributed. We've got to be sure that we are more transparent, but as I said, I'm not going to concentrate that on, I'm not going to say any more about that. I'll bring it up at the Finance and Governance Committee. It may be, if I'm here in the new council, I'll bring it up, but all I can say is well done for the officers to get this governance framework to us, because it enables us to be seen and build trust with the community that we're doing things right.
Any further discussion? Deputy Lord Mayor.
Just to point out that on page 16 of the document, which is page 139 of the attachment, it talks about decision making, and the city's governance framework is further enhanced through the adoption of clearly defined, transparent decision making process, and by the appropriate use of delegation. So, I mean, it does, contrary to what Alderman Briscoe said, it does cover transparency. So, and I think that's inherent in what this policy is all about, to be honest.
Further discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 18, Alderman Zuko.
I just move amendments to officer council delegations. Lord Mayor, this is just normal amendments in respect of officer delegations. They're nothing major, Lord Mayor, in respect of that, and I so move.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock. Any discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 19.
Yes, Lord.
Alderman Zuko. Oh, sorry, Councillor Sherlock, you've declared an interest, so we'll just wait for Councillor Sherlock to leave. Okay, Alderman Zuko.
Yes, Lord Mayor, I move the responses to notice of motion, the UTAS move to the city, and resolutions from public meetings in response to Save UTAS organisation.
Seconded by Councillor Dutta.
Yeah, Lord Mayor, on the 30th of May, this matter came to council, and I got up and actually moved that it should have gone to committee first. Probably a number of elected members weren't quite so happy with my deferring it to committee on the night. I remember a few people weren't very happy, but we nearly got unanimous decision that night, which was great, because the debate that went on clearly indicated that it was the best place to go. And chairing the meeting the other night as the Finance Committee, I actually sort of sat there, looked at the agenda, there was 5 representations, Lord Mayor. I looked at the time at 4:30, and I was sort of sitting there going, okay, 9:30, 10 o'clock maybe. But I've got to say, Lord Mayor, we actually got out of this chamber. I think it was about 7 o'clock-ish. All our representatives were absolutely sticking to the rules of speaking for 5 minutes, and then there were questions. So it was really one of those meetings, Lord Mayor, where you think you're going to be going all night, and I think it might get nasty or that. And it was one of those. I actually quite enjoyed chairing the meeting. Mind you, I had to keep a couple of elected members in line a few times, but that's part of the chairing role. Some of them are smiling, Lord Mayor. They know who they were. Lord Mayor, I've got to say that the Deputy Lord Mayor was also brought forward a motion that I think was very, very prudent for the situation. And there was a number of additions. I actually added one. There was another couple of other elected members that added some components too, which I think is very prudent and very relevant to the situation. Lord Mayor, I'm not here, and I'm not going to sit here and lay blame on who's at fault, who isn't at fault, and what happened and what didn't happen, and what are we doing going forward and how we're going forward. To my point of view, this motion here tonight, as presented and discussed at committee, is a good way forward for this council to move forward. We can sit back and look at what decisions we may have made in the past and what we haven't made. A lot of us can sort of start throwing stones at each other, in particular now that this election's upon us, Lord Mayor. I think what we need to do as a council is demonstrate to not only one group from the uni and the other group from the uni. I think we need to demonstrate as a council, as a city, complete leadership to ensure that whatever happens and how this goes forward, it's done in a proper consultative manner. Alderman Briscoe, I'll let you get up in a moment. It's all right. You're not going to beat me up, I assure you. And I believe that it's also very, very important in us writing to the university to ask them a number of things that they should do to help us. Look, we're not all going to be on page, which is fine, and I understand that, because we've all got our own viewpoints. But I think you know, this has somehow been something that a group of people in our community feel passionately about what they would like to see. There is a group at the university who are pursuing something, and it's not coming together very well, and I'd like to see it come together well. How it's going to come together, I don't know. I'm no Einstein. I'm just a mere restaurateur. But I think this is and could be the mechanism to make it happen and go forward in a far better collective manner.
Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you. Just to correct something that I talked about principles. There was no principles in the governance policy about transparency. I was talking about principles. There was 12 principles. Transparency wasn't one of them. There certainly was a mention of governance. However, that's just an explanation of the previous motion. I will be moving an amendment to the Finance Committee's motion. I've actually passed on this to Mr Jackson. And one of the...
Let's put that up, maybe.
One of the speakers, if I explain it, one of the speakers, Mr Michael Foster, asked, he didn't have a speech, he asked 7 questions, and we neglected, and I think it was just an oversight, we neglected to have something in the motion to say that the questions asked by Mr Michael Foster at the Finance Committee be the subject of a further officer's report to address them. So there's 7 questions. I've passed it on to Mr Jackson. I'll talk about that in a moment. I think those questions need to be answered. Just finished reading The University Idea and Its Enemies by a former academic of the University of Tasmania, Richard Davis. He kindly sent me a copy. And he concludes by quoting a poet. That the pursuit of truth may be injurious to happiness because it compels us to take leave of delusions that were pleasant while they lasted. I think I'll read that again. The pursuit of truth may be injurious to happiness because it compels us to take leave of delusions which were pleasant while they lasted. I think somehow it got into the system that we had made, the council as a whole made a decision to holus bolus support the university move into the CBD and the redevelopment of the land down at Sandy Bay, the campus, the beautiful campus down there, for other purposes. Now, I think the 700 odd pages of the report that was presented to us by the CEO a month ago now, and also reflected on the Finance and Governance Committee, demonstrated that no decision had been made. There were certain elements that we agreed to the aspirations of the university. For example, the now failed STEM building that was going to be in the city under the city deal. But at no stage has this council made a decision to support 100%. Somehow it got into all documents, like the precinct plan, which hasn't been adopted yet by the council, that we support and facilitate the move of the university into the city. That is, we haven't, as a council, done that. Now, how it got to this stage, I have been trying to find the truth of it. I think my meeting, I can't mention the minutes of those at least nine meetings you and the Deputy Lord Mayor had with the university and the VC. I can't release the contents of those because I've signed a confidentiality, but I didn't sign any confidentiality with the Vice-Chancellor Rufus Black, who said to me, oh no, the meeting, all the meetings we've had with the council leadership indicate 100% support. I'm so disappointed that you're going back from what the leadership have said. Words to that effect. So that's probably why the university thought we were on side, because the 9 meetings that I know Alderman Zuko turned up to one or two of them but was disappointed in the outcome and didn't turn up to any other meetings. So that's where I think it went wrong. I also think that we are, once we know the truth, which I think is about to be, is revealed, I think, to my satisfaction has been revealed, we've got to say, well, we've got a mess, how do we sort it out? The community has realised that we've made a mistake.
30 seconds.
I wonder if I could just have 1 minute longer.
Moved by Alderman Barakis, seconded by Alderman Thomas.
Now, the community represented... Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously.
The community, represented by the, say, UTAS campus group, have realised that we made a mistake. And the great speakers that were at the Finance Committee meeting, they were equally good at the public meeting, has pointed out that we've got to improve our governance. The Governance Committee, as by the motion tonight, hopefully will be abolished because it shouldn't have happened unless we had a really clear grounds of terms of reference and a reporting back mechanism. That's the mistake we made. I was part of that decision because in my mind at that time, we thought we were just encouraging people to, at the university, to have isolated faculties in the city, which the ones that are already present with new buildings, we probably agree with. I think the way forward, and I don't want to test it tonight, but because we've made no decision, I think we should have a neutral stance. Because there's no decision to support, there's no decision to say we don't support. Therefore, the only thing that's left is a decision, not a decision, that we don't support either one. But to go on now and say that we support, okay, I think I've said enough, and I can talk to my amendment, can I? After other people have talked? Because I haven't talked to my amendment, I was talking to the main motion.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll have the amendment in it. Would you like to move the amendment now?
I have moved the amendment. I'll be very brief with the amendment.
We'll need a seconder for the amendment. Seconded by Alderman Barakis.
As I said earlier, this is really just to make sure that the public's representation or deputation to the Finance Committee, we don't ignore those questions. They're very important questions to be answered by the officers. Thank you.
Okay, so that's seconded by Alderman Barakis. Any discussion on the amendments to answer the questions? Yes.
Through you to the CEO, do we know how different those questions were to at the infrastructure meeting as compared to the public meeting?
Could I answer that?
No, I think it's through the CEO. That's what the Deputy Lord Mayor wanted.
Sorry, Lord Mayor. Look, I haven't pored over those and made a comparison, so I'd need to take that on notice, albeit in 5 minutes. I'm sorry. Thanks.
Could I just explain that if you look at the questions on the board there, it refers to the officer's report and seeks further clarification of the officer's report.
Okay.
It seeks further in sense, it's what research has been undertaken, and etc. It's seeking clarification.
Okay.
Lord Mayor, I've got a question.
But the general amendment is to provide an answer to the questions.
Has this been circulated at all? Or this is the first chance we've had to see it? This is it tonight, right now?
I'm not sure. But it's just to answer the questions, sorry.
It's a principle, and it was circulated to the Finance and Governance Committee.
People want printed copies, or just the general principle of answering the questions is, I think, the motion, isn't it?
Well, it is. Just the general principle of answering the question.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to put Alderman Briscoe's motion to answer the 7 amendment, to answer the 7 questions or provide an officer response to the 7 questions.
I just need a clarification before I vote on this, Lord Mayor. Would we have a record of the questions asked? If they are, then I think I would be happy, because I was at that meeting, to support those questions. But if there's an elaboration or bringing in a different point, then because I haven't read it, I have difficulty reading it.
Can I clarify that? They are in fact the same questions that was read out at the meeting.
Lord Mayor, if I could just clarify my response earlier, I'm sorry, but it was stated that they were presented to the Infrastructure Committee, which is why I sort of doubted that I had I understand, but it was stated infrastructure during the course of the question, and that's why I was just clarifying, because I wasn't at the Infrastructure Committee and I wanted to make sure I was talking about the right thing. So that has been confirmed, and they are in fact the same questions that I did take on notice from the Finance and Governance Committee. So Lord Mayor, apologies for that on my part.
All right, we'll put the amendment by Alderman Briscoe. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Okay, so that's now the motion as amended. Any further discussion on the motion as amended?
Yes, Lord Mayor.
Oh, Alderman Baraka.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, Lord Mayor, I know Alderman Briscoe said that he'd like the council to take a neutral position on. I would agree, not wanting to test the floor right now, but I'd lean towards supporting him in that, but perhaps for different reasons. One of my concerns, which I've said numerous times on this matter, is that we are kind of caught in a difficult position here, because we might all have our own personal views on what we think UTAS should be doing or should not be doing. But every single one of us, or perhaps some of us after October and some new people, will have to sit in this same room and make decisions as a planning authority. So we could all have opinions in favour of the move, we could all have opinions against the move, but we are still going to have to take that hat off and put on our objective planning authority hats. And there's very limited power that the council has really in either supporting or not supporting this move. So I'll leave that there. I think that's been an ongoing frustration of mine in regards to this whole issue, because everybody's trying to pin us all into one camp or the other on this, and it doesn't change the fact that if something comes up that's compliant under the planning scheme, we're bound to support it, and if something comes up that's non-compliant, even if those that are in favour of it shouldn't be supporting that. The other point that was made, I think when we have this governance committee, I know it was said by some people on other items, Lord Mayor, that we don't want secret meetings with developers. I think the governance meeting was established so that conversations could be had with a major stakeholder with the intention of promoting the public good. I think that's commendable, but I think when these meetings are had behind closed doors, when conversations that are had which are of the public interest, and some conversations which possibly aren't in the public interest occur, and there's no accountability over them, I'm not sure that's in the public good. So I'm glad that we're moving away from that. It'd be good to see. It'd be good if the university would agree to release those, but that's ultimately that ball's in their court at this stage. And I would hope that for transparency, a lot of the questions that were asked do get answered properly. There were some suggestions made by deputation last week when we were discussing this, Lord Mayor. Some of those raised some very concerning points, including suggestions of influence over councillors. I think it's important that they're looked into or they're addressed, because I think they are quite serious. I won't repeat them today because I haven't actually seen those comments myself. And just one other thing, because I will support this motion, I think, and the motion that we have before us is better than the motion that was originally put, and I thank the Deputy Lord Mayor for that. But just in regards to the advice that was provided to us as an attachment in regards to this item on the question about former Lord Mayor Sue Hickey's letter to the Vice-Chancellor, it did reference a decision on the 6th of February 2017, whilst noting that, this, and I'll just read this for clarity, the paragraph from the correspondence noted above was not a formally resolved position of Council. However, it did reflect the Council's positive sentiment and tone during its consideration of the relevant item at its meeting. So I've looked up this meeting, Lord Mayor, and the relevant part of it, only says, and this was the part that was voted on, and I believe it was unanimous, but that the council participate in regular meetings with the University Council and pursue an amendment to the existing Memorandum of Understanding with the University of Tasmania that seeks to strengthen the strategic relationship between the parties and focus on joint research initiatives, including the socio-economic impacts of the university's move into the city and the movement of people in and around the city. Nothing in that suggests that council has taken a position in support of the move. All the council ever did was take a position that we would support looking into the pros and cons or the impacts of it, as is good governance. I'm concerned that that has been used to...
30 seconds.
Can I get an extra minute, Lord Mayor?
Moved by Alderman Briscoe, seconded by Deputy Lord Mayor. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously.
Lord Mayor, just quickly, I'm concerned that a motion for us to investigate the social economic impacts or pros and cons of an issue have been taken by a predecessor on behalf of this council to imply approval or support or endorsement of a major policy or a major project that will have a huge impact on this city, when the council up until that point had never made such a decision. I'm not sure that that decision's ever been properly, concretely made. And as Alderman Briscoe said, I think that's correct. I think it's important that we have a neutral position on this. However, the fact that this has been implied and this has been communicated to the university that we are, as a council, supportive, and not just supportive but committed to this move, has possibly sent some mixed messages to the university in and of itself, which has potentially brought us to the situation that we're in. But I think it's important for the public's sake that we do have a full understanding of what decisions have been made, what conversations have been had, and how we've got here. And putting that aside, we do have to reflect on our responsibilities when it comes to decision making on this matter, because it is an important matter for the public.
It's time.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Further discussion? Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I have a question to begin with. And the question is with regards to the governance forum. When the this council established that or endorsed that decision, appointments were made for 4, I think, of the council reps to be there. Now, when someone does not attend the meeting or resigns or leaves, do we have a communication that you're no longer there, so someone else can be put in place? Or what's the process? Again, for me, this is a governance issue as well.
CEO.
Thank you. Through Lord Mayor, through to you, Councillor Dutta. Look, my understanding is that that's perhaps a custom and practice that relates to some groups and some committees that councillors or indeed elected members are appointed to. But in this instance, there wasn't a requirement of any member to be reported through to council for non-attendance or indeed to have their position replaced. I haven't been able to find any evidence of that, Lord Mayor, and it's not pertained to the terms of reference either. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Lord Mayor, that question was directed to me. I was the elected member in question.
I think it was a general question.
Well, there was only one elected member that didn't continue on that committee, and that was myself, and I've made that public quite a number of times, so it was directed at me, and I believe I should have a right of response to that question.
I think Alderman Dutta, Councillor Dutta can ask his questions how he wants.
Yeah, okay.
I wanted to know from the CEO if there was a policy, and I have got that answer. Thank you.
Any other discussion, Councillor Dutta? Councillor Coates.
Look, a question through you, Lord Mayor. I would welcome the, I know you've already said it publicly, and I just want to make sure my memory is correct, because I think you had very valid reasons for not attending. So I'd love to hear, if I could, through you, Lord Mayor, a question to the sitting Alderman.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Quotes. Lord Mayor, after attending two meetings, I actually felt totally uncomfortable in attending any further meetings, and I actually spoke about it to the former General Manager about that, and I advised him that I would not be continuing going to those meetings, because I felt totally uncomfortable with the manner in which the meetings were proceeding. And that's exactly what happened, Lord Mayor. You got your answer now?
Thank you. It makes me much more comfortable in supporting this motion. Thanks.
Question. I could be wrong, Lord Mayor, but the CEO just referred to terms of reference. I've never seen terms of reference of that governance committee. Can the CEO provide some more details?
So, through you, Lord Mayor, I would need to go back to my notes. I certainly did a deep dive into a whole range of materials associated with the UTAS move. There were certain intended outcomes for that governance forum, but I can't recall the actual terms of reference. So I will need to take that on notice and provide that advice.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Further discussion? Councillor Dutton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Now, I must thank Alderman Briscoe for bringing that motion in March with regards to this particular matter. And I think, there were about 3 or 5 major points. But in motion number 1, there were 3 elements that he referred to. And one was with regards to consultation. The other was in regards to steps. And thirdly, with regards to decision making. Now, someone has referred to the 700 pages, and I've looked at them, and most of us have read, hopefully not thoroughly, but have picked up most of the points. Now, I once again want to note the statement made that there was a mistake made by the council. Now, what I want to say here is this, that when I read through this whole pages of 700 of them, there is definitely a consultation mentioned in there, because the consultation process occurred with the council, and there were 3 consecutive councils. The consultation occurred with the Lord Mayors. The consultation occurred quite extensively in a number of documentation. It states that quite clearly. And then it talks about the steps that took place. Now, for me, the step simply refers to an action that you bring about to achieve your objective, your outcome or the goal. And here, when I read all that documentation in front of me, about 700 of them, the steps taken are very clear to me. The university, as someone already mentioned, they had the vision, they had the aspirations, they had the intention, and based on that, the council was supportive, because there are a number of places where it says that because they were supportive, there was a memorandum of understanding, there was a deed, there was conferences people attended, so forth, with the intention of the movement. And there again, you will find quite clearly, as I look at some of these decisions and the papers presented to us, that in 2014, council supported UTAS development of infrastructure, and it is in the context of the city that is mentioned. In 2015, a memorandum was drawn, and reference is made to the master plan and the rezoning of Sandy Bay. In 2017, council decision followed by former Lord Mayor Suhiki, and again, if you put it in the context, the decision was made on the 6th, and then it was followed. So there is definitely a connection, a correlation between the two of them. What is interesting here is that the 4 of us came in 2018 in October, the new members. By then, there was experienced people sitting here of about 100 years of experience put together. And we came in that context realizing and be guided by the senior members to say, now, this was quite okay, as it were, because the work was done. Now, what is important for me is that in April, a workshop was conducted where Professor Rufus Black came and spoke, and it was very clear, it was out of that in June, a university governance forum or panel was then established and formed. Now, all along, if you look at 18, if you look at 19, if you look at 20, 21, nothing happened. None of us said it was wrong. We went along with it. Towards the end of 2021, I remember quite vividly I received a phone call, and then I met with Professor Pam Sharp, and I think that is when the community got in and started moving this whole thing. And I want to thank them for it, because I was of the view that we were supportive simply because we had already accepted that marriage with the university. And so the evidence and the arguments presented and the questions I asked was very clear to me that there was this relationship between the university and the Hobart City Council. But then when I realized this now, and the points that have been brought up, can I have a minute, please, Lord Mayor?
Moved by Alderman Briscoe, seconded by Alderman Baracus. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Unanimously.
And so now to come to this situation and the stage we're in, I would like to very strongly compliment and commend the Deputy Lord Mayor for bringing the motion she has in depth, in detail, that encompasses most of the issues that has been raised. And so I think moving forward, it's not time for us to play this fancy foot like dribbling like Pele. It is time that we realize
I don't dribble.
Order.
I don't dribble. I think that is.
Sorry, I don't. What was the?
He called it dribble. Yeah.
Councillor Dutta. Sorry.
Different soccer. Sorry, I apologise. Different dribble. It's all right. Yeah, it's all right. I just heard the dribble part. Okay.
It was like, fancy. It's like Pele used to dribble the ball. That's all I'm saying. And the Italians are pretty good at that. The Indians don't play soccer. But all what I'm saying is that, it's time that we took this on board. We listen to what the community has to say. We look at all the papers that will come through us, and hopefully we can learn from this and move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Further discussion, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. And I thank the officers for the reports and the CEO's report for 6.4, which gives a significant background to what has happened over the many years since, I think, 2008, where there has been this discussion around UTAS's move into the city and what that might mean, and also with the background of over 40 documents as attachments. So I think all of that information and that summary is really beneficial to helping certainly me make a recommendation to Council or to the Finance and Governments Committee. I would have liked to have done this a month earlier, but that wasn't to be, and I perfectly understand the governance around that decision. The Save UTAS Sandy Bay Campus group have had the public meeting, and we've had quite a lot of input from various people who talked at that meeting, and I think that's and so the public discourse continues, which I think is a healthy thing in a democracy. There is, I think Alderman Briscoe talked about listening to the community. I might just add that they are a portion of the community. They're not the whole community. And that, I think, is really important to remember when we're discussing how we represent the community, because it's not just one portion of the community as well. In this motion, I think what it does is provide the information that we have been presented over many years and puts it in one place, one accessible place for the community on the website. And I won't go through all of it, but it certainly does look to address those concerns around the governance issues, to abandon the high-level meetings with between the Vice-Chancellor and elected members, and just leave that to the council officers to work in relation to the strategic moves that the university might have, or any other planning matters that is instrumental in what you do with any major player in the city, and that is also reflected in this committee's resolution. I think there's always quite a lot of, or there can be conjecture around what might have happened in meetings behind closed doors, and I think well and truly that should be released. The conjecture doesn't always help with the conjecture of the council's relationship with the university as a major player in town. And I'd like to think that we can have a mature discussion. We can provide that information to the public so they can be better informed in relation to anything that's been occurring. We're talking about the move into the city of the UTAS campus, not much around what might happen at Sandy Bay campus, and I'm sure over time, which is obviously these are two very different components in my mind, but I'm sure over time there will be further discussion in relation to this. But I'm hopeful that this motion, as amended at committee, will be supported. I think it addresses quite a lot of concerns, but also says what we have as a council done over many, many years, rather than what's only come to light, so to speak, in the last couple of years.
Oh, sorry.
Alderman Thomas.
Thanks, Alderman Zucco. Look, I think, from my understanding and my memory, there was certainly no malintent by this council when we voted to form this governance committee. It was very much on the basis of major shifts in the city and major things that were happening, and there was a desire to, and certainly not in any way related to the planning role, but a desire to continue a relationship that had been held for, since the University of Tasmania existed, remembering with the City Council, remembering that there was a period in the 50s of quite significant controversy between the two organisations when the city originally supported the university going to Sandy Bay, and then was very much opposed to it at the end of the day, and the university left without our approval if it even needed it. But I think for me the feeling out there at the moment is one of considerable community angst. Whether that's a matter of communication style or communication, it doesn't really matter. It's out there, and this community of our city of Hobart, our beloved city, is actually in grief, and there's a lot of really hard soul beating and concern out there. And I think this council has responded really well to the fact that we are a player, but I genuinely believe that we are one player at the table, and there are three people at this table. One of them is the City Council. One of them is very firmly, because they've been so involved at their own personal cost and involvement to save the university campaign, and the other party at the table is the University of Tasmania. But I do make this comment, and I've made it to the university, and I'm going to make it again more formally. I don't believe that this council would have turned around and said, our CEO, Kelly Grigsby, is going to be our only point of contact for this operation. And I think the University Council, this is the most strategic matter that has happened at the university since the 50s, this move back into the city. And I really believe that this council is doing its utmost to be engaged and involved, but we're still in a situation where I think the missing party at this table, the missing party at the table is very much the University Council. And I genuinely believe that it's unfortunate that, try as he is, and I believe he's a very very honest and ethical man. The Vice-Chancellor is, like Ms Grigsby, not the one who should be fronting this in the entirety. I think it should actually be the President of the University Council, the whole Council, or delegates that somehow are meeting with this important committee, the Save UTAS committee, because there may, as the Deputy said, be a whole heap of groups out there, but the one that we know is out there, that we're reminded of every day as we drive along the road, is the Save UTAS committee. And I would ask publicly that the university, realising as a responsible organisation how important it is, starts getting a new communication line in with the Save UTAS group and any other group that's got significant concern, because this council, and we should be involved and engaged, and we should be listening to the community, but the University Council is dealing with a huge strategic issue at the moment. And that subdivision, whatever happens down there, it's a major change to our city. What's happening here is a major change. So look, they may have their internal arrangements, and I think Professor Rufus Black has said is an honourable man who's doing his best, but the University Council needs to come out of hiding and get back onto the front foot here and be engaged with its community, because we'll stay engaged, we must stay engaged, but the University Council must stand forward and be engaged and be involved now.
Oh, you're going to speak, Lord?
I will speak, yeah.
Yeah, it's okay.
Are you
Sorry.
summing up? Or?
I was going to. Sorry, I was rude. Sorry,
No worries. No, that's fine. Look, I would like to make a few comments and thank the Deputy and everyone else who had input into the motion. It's definitely better than the original one. I think one of the good things that was undertaken as part of the report was that the history of this entire issue was set out very transparently for people about all of the steps that many of the other speakers have acknowledged about the relationship between the City of Hobart and UTAS, just as there is probably between the City of Hobart and other institutions, but it is one of our biggest employers. Now, history can be rewritten and it can be spun in different directions depending on how people want to present things. And, you know, I think one of the I said at the committee meeting, it was an unedifying part of this discussion in the last 6 months has been that people have decided to politicise this and to try and basically paint certain parts of the story, certain parts of the history to suit their particular narrative. And I do think this relates to this particular, I didn't appreciate I guess the verballing that seemed to come through from Alderman Briscoe, the innuendo and the conspiracy that somehow everything was heading in this particular direction, and then these 9 meetings with the leadership completely changed direction. That is complete fabrication of what occurred, and I would like to just run through a few things. So the organisation clearly made some very clear directions to the University of Tasmania, including Lord Mayor Hickey's letter of support and the very strong lobbying for the STEM building. The governance committee was established in an open council meeting by unanimous resolution of everyone sitting around this table, and it was done in response to a letter sent by Professor Black, which said that in Launceston, when they were moving the campus into the City of Launceston, they had a broad committee where there would be exchange of information and sharing of information. And so this particular group was set up. None of us, I didn't ask to be on this committee, I was appointed to the committee, and there was these 9 meetings. Some of us went to some of them, some of us didn't go to them. Alderman Zuko says now that he felt very uncomfortable, and I know he's going to try and jump up, but there was no mention to anyone around the table. The General Manager never mentioned it. And, you know, I have seen the notes of the meeting, and there's no suggestion there's any discomfort. I've got to say, I have said very strongly, publicly, as has the Deputy Lord Mayor, that and the Council has now decided, we are comfortable with these notes being provided, because I think it will demonstrate that this was a lot of information sharing between officers about projects. It wasn't a particularly interesting meeting particularly to be part of. And I think all of this kind of politicisation has led to quite a lot of conspiracy theories, and some of these, the motivations behind that are unfortunately very transparent and very much tied to politics. I think people might also like to note that the Sandy Bay Master Plan, where it was revealed that the UTAS was suddenly going to sort of do quite a dramatic change at its Sandy Bay campus, came to us after those governance committee meetings stopped happening. And don't forget, this all happened during COVID. So a lot of these were just online meetings during COVID. And the Sandy Bay Master Plan came a few months after that time. And everyone, again, around this table sat and listened to that Sandy Bay Master Plan and workshopped with the officers to develop a submission, which was passed unanimously by this council. Now, again, down the track, when people were aware of concerns in the community and aware that this master plan had shocked people and people hadn't had strong buy-in to it, I think people have now recognised that this wasn't a good process, and now there's a bit of backpedalling. But it's really important to note that this council has been very close to UTAS. I wasn't one of the people who went on the very expensive trips to Europe. Other people in this room were. And so we've just got to be careful that we deal with this maturely. I think this motion does deal with it maturely, and we don't try and use this as a political football, which unfortunately in the last 6 months we have seen that, and it has led to some very unfortunate slurring of both colleagues but also other people involved in the debate. Thank you.
Well, Mayor, in my summing up, actually in my earlier speech, I actually made about all of us coming together collectively and all that, and I was very calm, very cool and collected, so we could all work to move forward, blah blah blah. But it's been you talk about politics and that there's been some innuendo in regards to whether or not I now have brought this to the attention or whether there's 100 years of experience here and all of a sudden the deputy gets all the accolade and has been here 18 years of it, that 100 years. We get a summary of since 2014 right through to the present day, 1921, nothing happened. We all went along with it. Well, let's have a look at this. Okay, 2017. The Council participate in regular meetings with the University Council and pursue an amendment to the existing Memorandum of Understanding with the University of Tasmania that seeks to strengthen the strategic relationship between the parties. Joint research initiatives including social economic impacts, the university move to the city, of movements of people around the city, and it goes on. I go to meetings. I was asked the question in respect of why I pulled away. I gave a generalised viewpoint. It was also, mentioned that it was the view that this was all agreed to, and the master plan was in place. Well, there was no master plan until you actually design the master plan and show us the master plan. Seriously. That's how master plans work. I've seen master plans for years here. Well, until I see it, I don't know what you actually want to do. I actually take offence to sort of making it that I now have made reference to the meetings and what happened and why I didn't go. UTAS was set up in early to mid-21. There were 28 or 32 people there. I was one of them. I attended the first meeting. I didn't participate other than I just said...
30 seconds, Alderman Zuko.
I'd like an extra 2 minutes, Lord Mayor, because I'm absolutely ropeable here now, after trying to calm things down earlier.
So, okay, Alderman Zuko, I think I think that's been moved by Alderman Baracus. Alderman Briscoe, second by Alderman Baracus. But can I ask that you sum up?
I'm summing up, Lord Mayor. I'm summing up to what everyone has been saying, Lord Mayor, because you mentioned now. I only brought it to the attention now. I actually brought it to the attention of the Save UTAS group back in 21. I actually brought it to the attention of the General Manager after the second meeting. Why didn't I continue to attend? Because I was asked that question earlier. I didn't continue attending because what the university was saying to us was completely different to why I was there. And to my point of view, when I'm at a negotiating table and there's a group on the other side and all they want me to do is give, and I'm sitting there going, "What? This is not what I'm here for. I came to discuss a house and you want a monstrosity. Sorry, I'm not coming to that meeting again." And I mentioned it to the General Manager. And what
point of order. This is introduction of new information.
No, I think Councillor Dutta has a point of order. Alderman Zuko, if you could just sum up.
I'm summing it up. I'm just about to sit down. I was nearly about to sit down until I got interrupted, which normally happens every time I'm speaking. Yeah. Right, Lord Mayor, and at the time, I actually had a discussion with the General Manager, and what I'm going to do now, Lord Mayor, not now, tomorrow maybe, I'm going to go through my mobile phone and hopefully see some text messages, if I kept them from 2020, and my emails. Because if I do find my correspondence to the General Manager, because it was very, very brief, but I had mainly a verbal conversation. You were not part of that verbal conversation, Lord Mayor, so you can't tell me that I introduced it now.
Okay. Thanks for the summing up, Alderman Zuko. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 20 is the Parks and Recreation Committee. Alderman Briscoe.
Get everything up on the screen. I think it was a very good debate. University, interesting your comments, which I'll take up with you personally. I'll move the motion that's on the books.
Seconded by Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yeah.
Sorry, have we got Alderman Councillor Sheila?
Yeah, we perhaps should wait. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, she's gone. You may have talked a few potential candidates out of standing, maybe.
An exodus.
By Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yes. Now this arose. The motion arises from concerns, good concerns that were brought up by Alderman Baracus in November 2021, where the council was suggesting that a tree removal was going to cost the person $60,000 when first quote they had was $13,000. Now, fortunately for that tree, and fortunately for the applicant, the tree was retained and there was a different design, but other trees were removed. Apparently 5 trees were removed, but the $60,000 one wasn't. So I did get estimate of what our street trees are worth. It's about $209 million, and I've been a long supporter of street trees. And people who've been here a few years, perhaps even people who've only been here 17 years, may refer to when I could get up very quickly and I climbed the tree in front of the town hall and sat there and got a photograph in the Mercury trying to save the trees in front of the town hall, because I thought taking away trees, and when climate change might mean the temperature of the city may go up, that we need plenty of places for shade. So I've got a long history of supporting trees, and we managed to save that because I just said to the public, just ring up the Lord Mayor, he's trying to get rid of the trees, and he was inundated with, and I had a lot of respect for the Lord Mayor, John Freeman, but he said, "Oh, Jeff, you shouldn't have done that. I can't chop him down now," because he just wanted to return to, I know the deputy said she's just recently been to Rome for holiday, and there's not many street trees in Rome, because he wanted Italian Piazza or Palace to look like that, because it is an Italian design, our town hall. So the officers have given us a report and gone through how many trees have been removed. Now, I'm not quite sure whether there were a total of 15 trees removed or a total of 8 trees or 9 trees removed, but in discussions with some of the applicants, then they've made design changes to allow retention of significant amount of trees. So to the extent of the officer's estimate of 290,000 in tree amenity has been retained. I think it's a sensible way of going. It addressed that dreadful PR exercise that we were saying, $60,000 to remove a tree that probably was only 20 years old. But again, I commend Alderman Barakis, because then I think the motion came to the committee from the council, where we looked at our street tree retention program. I'm sure Alderman Barakis may have a different view now. He may not support this motion, but I do commend him for bringing the attention of the council to that $60,000 tree.
Councillor Harvey.
Lord Mayor, I remember this when it happened, and it was a bit of a beat up at the time, because the original quote of 13,000 was accurate. Then the proponent redesigned it and said we need to cut this tree down instead, and that's where the difference occurred in the two prices. That was never explained. What was leapt on was this is a $60,000 tree, but the proponent already had permission to remove the $13,000 trees, but not that one. So there was a bit of a beat up and a bit of, I don't know, hyperbole around it. But anyway, redesigning the project meant that valuable tree could be saved. And I think having a policy like this is hugely important, because every year, as an Alderman Briscoe now is a tree hugger, as demonstrated by his escapades in the trees outside here when he was capable of climbing trees.
I agree with you.
Now he struggles to get out of the chair, but that's okay. We all age. We age gracefully.
I'll help you next time. Thank you, boss.
But what this points is that we do need to have serious policy with regard to protecting trees. And the older the tree, the more valuable the tree is. And old trees that have hollows in them are more valuable than anything, because they're the trees that look after our native wildlife. And if we want to have masked owls and other birds inhabiting the city, we need to maintain the oldest trees, because they're the most valuable trees, because they provide the best habitat. So having a policy that puts a value on a tree is hugely important, but it still doesn't mean you should be able to buy your way into cutting down a valuable habitat tree. So I think we've still got to be careful that you can't just say, well, I'll pay to have that old tree cut down. That's not the way this should work. It should be that tree is more valuable than you could ever imagine. It doesn't necessarily have a financial value. The intrinsic value of that tree is it's irreplaceable. So I think we need to be really careful about how we allow trees to be removed in Hobart, because we've lost a lot of habitat, very valuable habitat trees over time, and we can't let that continue, because it diminishes the biodiversity that we value in Hobart.
Further discussion? Barakis?
Lord Mayor, I think it might be slightly unfair to call the issue and the reporting of what occurred a few months ago as a beat up. I think whether we talk about one design or another design, one that went from $13,000 and one that went to $60,000, the reality was there was still a quote given for the removal of a tree, which, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that tree was listed as a significant.
So it wasn't the cost of the removal as such. Anyway.
Value of the tree.
Value of the tree.
So the tree was listed.
It's not about being listed.
Well,
every tree has value.
Look, the reality is, though, we're talking about a huge amount of money. The kind of money that, in this particular instance and in this particular story, the design of the house was ultimately changed to avoid this, but that's not possible in all aspects. And Whilst I think everybody around this chamber would agree that there is a need to preserve trees in the city and our green cover, I think there is a balance that needs to be drawn. And when we are talking about not just what people are doing on their own property, but especially when we're talking about developments that are occurring which intending on providing more housing, which is something that everybody around this chamber also agrees with, I think that balance is in the wrong place. I think when you're talking about levels of money that are prohibitively expensive and would result in certain projects not going ahead, and perhaps from what Councillor Harvey said, that's part of the intention.
Point of order.
Happy to...
Look, this is all being... Well, the information being provided now, or the commentary being provided now is not... it's disingenuous.
Sorry.
That needs to be another addition to the point of order points.
Please continue.
Misrepresentation is...
I didn't aim to misrepresent, so perhaps to give some extra clarity to my statement, Councillor Harvey did make the point that perhaps these trees are irreplaceable and no amount of money should allow somebody to buy their way out of this. So hence my interpretation that perhaps these prices are intended or being prohibitively expensive, but I'm happy to have misinterpreted that. But look, I think if we do get into those sort of levels of obscene pricing for the removal of trees, especially which aren't significant listed, you do get into the position where, and as we've seen in perhaps heritage issues in the past with certain developments, where some people will take the attitude that it's easier to beg for forgiveness than it is, easier to ask for forgiveness than it is to beg for permission to chop the tree down and go, oops, I'll pay the fine. So I don't think this is an appropriate way for us to implement this policy. I don't think it's correctly balanced. I think the intention of it is well placed. I might foreshadow a alternative motion. I'm not confident that we'll get around to it, but that this return to the appropriate committee, and that a balance of charges that better reflects council's priorities be determined. But look, I'll foreshadow that. As I said, I'm not confident that we'll necessarily get to it, but I would hope that we are able to reach a point where we do have costs and fees and perhaps punitive charges that are reflective of where our council wants to be, and that includes preserving trees, but I think it also includes promoting the developments and the projects and housing that we want to see in this city, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'd like to sum up, Alderman Briscoe.
Just very briefly, and just indulge me for a moment. I meant to do this earlier, Lord Mayor. I know it's not summing up, but one officer is going to leave us today. It's going to be the last council meeting, and that is Mr. John Fisher, who's down there waiting for a question about a tree. We need more officers like Mr. Fisher. You ask a question and you get straight away a good reply. A reply you may not like the answer of it, but at least you get a reply. He's been very good in the media, and I'm certain his boss sitting beside, I think it's his boss, I'm not quite sure in the restructure whether he's probably got 4 bosses at the moment, 5. He certainly has been an asset to the parks, and talk about saving trees, not necessarily street trees. I don't think street trees come really under your portfolio, but because of the work you've done with the bushfire stuff on the mountain and elsewhere, a lot more of our biodiversity is saved. So I'd like publicly to thank Mr. Fisher, and I do envy him going to his 30-degree pool up somewhere up north, somewhere there, and rejoin his wife, who they were going to move down here, but I think Mr. Fisher has talked her not to come down here because he's had to suffer a couple of winters. So best wishes, and I appreciate all your work you've done. Managed to get that in a summing up. I hope everyone except at least one person will support the tree retention program now.
Okay, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Show of hands, all those in favour.
Sexton, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Coates.
Cut them all down.
Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe. the Lord Mayor.
Against?
Marcus.
Okay, now that's the end of our open portion. Would you like to continue into the closed portion?
No,
now?
I'd like to
It's
go.
only a few minutes.
I would like to go
By Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by, sorry, Alderman Thomas. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously.